Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Deep Dive featuring my friend and colleague, Bobby Seagull. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I feel kind of weird saying on the show. It's a very American thing, but you're like a TV celebrity these days. So thanks for hanging out with us on YouTube.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And in my school, kids can't use the C word. They can either call me a teacher with profile or high profile, but they can't say celebrity. In my school, no students are not allowed to. So I actually tell them off. All other teachers.
Okay, awesome. So I wonder if we could start. If you could just give sort of the 1 minute bio, like who are you, what do you do, what kind of like why are you a celebrity to some people, and then we can kind of dive into details, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about your bio that is worth kind of diving into.
Absolutely. So my name is Bobby Seagull. I'm from East Ham in the London Borough of Newham. I'm a school maths teacher and also a part-time doctorate student at Cambridge on maths education. So my career is I used to work in banking as a trader at Lehman Brothers, one of those people, and then at Nomura, and then a chartered accountant at PwC. But at PwC I had an epiphany when I was teaching new graduates, changed careers, moved to education, did my teacher training at Cambridge, and I thought my path would be to be an educator and teacher. But there at Cambridge, in fact, where we met at Emmanuel, I had a lucky break, as it were. I was on a quiz show called University Challenge, and then got almost like plucked out of obscurity into being a public figure for education. And since then, I'm still a part-time teacher, but I have presented a couple of BBC TV series. One's currently on right now. I have a podcast. I have a couple of books out. I represent various organizations on a national scale. So I'm still the same me, mostly. But I just have now a wider platform to share my love for learning, education, maths, reading with a wider public.
Okay, awesome. So you kind of dropped out of this high-powered city job. Mm-hmm. You ended up in Cambridge, and you just like it seemed like you became famous overnight thanks to University Challenge. But kind of saying that, I feel a bit bad saying that, because there really isn't any such thing as sort of overnight success. So I wonder if you can sort of tell the story, like how was it from your perspective, and perhaps if you could kind of give the context for people who wouldn't have seen you on University Challenge a few years ago.
Yeah, of course. Again, so for those who don't know, University Challenge is a intercollegiate quiz show between different universities and colleges in the UK. It's been going on since 1962, so it's possibly the world's oldest continuous running quiz show. When I joined Cambridge, I was doing my teacher training, then did my master's, and then doing my master's at Emmanuel, where we met. And then there, I was the captain of Emmanuel College Cambridge for the quiz show. And again, maybe another time we can talk about the selection process. But it's quite intense how teams get selected. You know, there's a quiz in the bar, then there's a separate buzzer trial, there's interviews. So it's a long process. And I went on the quiz show. And the quiz show, it has a habit of making people go viral for a few days. Often you get every series, you get a couple of people that pop up, have a couple of articles. Yeah. But what was unusual in my series was there was myself from Emmanuel, and there was another character called Eric Monkman from Wolston. And he's perhaps the most viral character ever on the series. But I also separately viraled on the series. And it was a combination of good knowledge, but actually the thing that I'm more proud about was my positive attitude, the way I got my teammates to get the right answers, the way I was sort of like an encouraging team captain, my sort of joviality. And again, on a quiz show that's meant to be very serious and academic. Again, I'll be embarrassed and say, before I was on it, I used to think it's quite a boring show. I love it now, because it's not meant to be a fun show, but somehow my personality came across without meaning to, because they pre-recorded it all. They recorded it from Feb to April, and it was broadcast from the following July. And there was a second match in particular, because I was teaching part-time in a school in London. And I think it was November 2016. That match, I went viral on Twitter. BBC did a tweet saying, "Is this the happiest ever contestant on University Challenge?" And then the following morning, I came to school, and all my students were like, "Mr. Seagull, you were trending on Twitter, you were on Instagram, you were on all the radio stations." And then at that moment, I realized, my life might be a bit different.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I think it's very interesting that you point out that every year on University Challenge, there are always a couple of people that sort of go viral. I think possibly the year or two before you, there was that dude, possibly King's College Cambridge, who sort of wore a chain and stuff, and that was sort of
oh yes,
yeah,
Shah, King
exactly,
Shah.
Yeah, King Shah. That was very much outside of the norm of what you would expect from University Challenge contestants, but you somehow sort of this sort of events came together to mean that when you had that kind of springboard, you didn't just kind of vanish into obscurity, and you've released like 2 books, you've got TV shows, you've got everything. Like how much of that was pure dumb luck, and how much of that was you recognizing that you've got the springboard and sort of actively doing things to sort of promote yourself, as it were?
Of course, that's a good question. I think it's a combination of two, because often people need a bit of luck to be in the right place at the right time. Of course, that was there in terms of I was there in my series, and I had Eric Monkman, the captain of Wilson's, both of us emerging at the same time, and that helps. But then it's how do you deal with that platform? Because again, every year there are 2 or 3 people that emerge and have their moment in the spot, like Andy Warhol's 15 minutes. But I think what made me perhaps different was that, again, I changed careers. I'd left investment banking, chartered accountancy to become a teacher, and I wanted to make an impact in education. And initially, I thought it would be through being a great head of department, a great head teacher, maybe being ambitious and Asian, being a head teacher for like 20 schools, all those multi-academy head teachers, and maybe opening up schools in India, Pakistan, the Middle East. One of those, I thought, the Seagull chain of head schools. But on University Challenge, when I first emerged, a lot of people said, "Oh, can we get you on to do an interview here? Can you write an article for us? Can you come to Manchester?" And again, I've changed my view slightly since then, but I was very much a yes man. If someone gave me an opportunity, I would make it happen. They would say, "Bobby, we need you in the studio at 6 a.m. and it's like 10, and it's now 11 o'clock at night. So I need to leave the house at 4:30, and I would say yes to opportunities. And the more I said yes to things, people said, "He's really reliable." And okay, one, I delivered on their program, or if I did an article, it was a good article, but I would deliver, and I would never say no. People would say, "Come to Manchester tomorrow. Can you write an article? Can you write 20 questions for a quiz tomorrow? Can you come on our show at 7:30 in the morning?" I would say yes, yes, yes. And then it became a virtual cycle where I would get calls left, right, and center. And obviously then I think initially culminated in a radio show on BBC where we interviewed Stephen Fry. And if anyone knows who Stephen Fry is, he is like the epitome of the modern day polymath in terms of he's got such a breadth of knowledge. And again, I'd love to model myself on him one day. And then it just took off from there. I think it's the yes attitude, because I definitely known other contestants again who've done equally as well or better than me, but when they've been asked to do things again, they're a bit reticent because they think, oh, it's a bit, again, it is scary putting yourself on the public platform. Because I'll be honest, I had no intention of ever being a public figure. I enjoyed my life. Again, you're going on a quiz show, but I thought I'll win it, and that's it. I didn't win it at the end. I lost to my friend Monkman. But I think it was saying yes, and then it just spiraled.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Like, I kind of get the impression that in the world of show business, there are a lot of things that happen kind of very last minute. That there's this story, we've got to get someone who's an expert in education. Oh, let's reach out to Bobby. And I get the impression that the fact that you cultivated this sort of like essentially being a yes man meant that you were the reliable go-to guy for anything to do with like education or like schooling and things like that. Is that fair to say?
It really is. Again, people have asked me for my opinion on education, my opinion on budgets. Again, I was asked a couple of years ago to go on Any Questions, and Any Questions is again, for those who haven't heard, it's a UK program. So something called the Question Time, which is the really harsh television version of politicians battling it out. And there's a radio version, a bit more sedate, but still tough environment, called Any Questions. And they normally get a Labour, Conservative, and another politician. And normally there's one sort of off-centre candidate, maybe a really famous comedian. But they said, "Oh, Bobby, we've got something on education budget. Do you want to come on the show?" And again, okay, I'm not a politician. But again, I said, yes, I'll do it. And obviously I was very nervous. But then since then, I've been asked to do more education things. So again, I think it is the saying yes to things and delivering, and then people then will come back for further education things. So again, I now do work. I'm an ambassador for the Premier League. Again, you can tell I've a claret and blue West Ham tie, West Ham shirt in the background.
Nice.
But I've modeled as part of my teaching and my public persona on Gareth Southgate. So can you see this waistcoat?
Oh, that's where it's from. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
It is. So I used to wear a jacket and tie, but Gareth Southgate, the England manager, was so positive, and he really believed that all of us, we can achieve a lot more if we believe in ourselves. And actually, I interviewed him for part of a quiz about a month ago. And again, he said that the thing was, you're always trying to be the best version of yourself. So I try and portray myself as like, I've got a set of talents, but I try and make the most of my talents, and that's what I want my students to do as well. So make the most of what you have.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and I think that's like a really good learning point for anyone kind of listening to this, is that often, like, we all, for example, the first time you get approached to do a TV interview, possibly about a topic you're not entirely familiar with, like, I don't know, education budget or something, you would get that feeling of like, oh, I don't know if I'm qualified enough to do this. But you say yes and you figure it out. Like, you've got Google, you can like look up everything you need to know about the education budget before you get into the interview, and then you can deliver, and you can be sort of jovial and charming and nice on camera. And overall, so many good things happen as a result of saying yes to these unexpected opportunities, and you just never know which way they're going to lead. I think one analogy that I like to use is the idea of window openers versus door knockers. Possibly the phrasing can do a bit of work, but like the idea is that there's sort of two sorts of people. There's people that kind of base their decisions on sort of a window model where they can see the outcome on the other side, and then they will sort of step through the window to get to the outcome. But then there's the other sorts of people whereby it's a door and you don't know what's on the other side, but you're going to knock and you're going to open the door and you'll be like, well, you know, I guess I'll see what happens. And if you do that enough, then you get all these unexpected opportunities. And I think that increasingly the world that we live in today lends itself far more to the door type of people, whereby you don't have this sort of firm trajectory charted out in front of you, but you just seize the opportunities and you kind of go for it.
Yeah, I think it's about people that are willing to go with the flow a bit. I think you do need a plan. You do need a sense of, okay, this is what I sort of want to achieve. But generally, again, in the last few years in particular, it's being prepared to go with the knocks and the punches. And if an opportunity presents itself, don't always sniff it down. For example, I've got a bottle here, which is Love Island. If anyone knows, I'm not advocating watching Love Island as a teacher, but it is a show that gets like 3.5-4 million viewers. But anyway, so again, when I became known as a public geek, as it were, which I'm very proud of, I'm happy to defend geeks. I was invited to take part in a parody show called Geek Island. And it's like a tongue-in-cheek show where you've got people that are meant to be hot, whatever, but are smart. And again, it had a risk by taking it, because you could go on a show that embarrasses you and you look silly, and then you've damaged your brand and your reputation. But again, I took the gamble, I went on it. And then since then, I've been seen as someone that can advocate geekery. People that are geeks and nerds, I'm happy to stand up and represent them. So again, that was the risk that I took. And I got offered it, and I took it, and it could have backfired. It could have been a disaster. It could have been like a Love Island show where I got to wear, a top full of shit program, but it wasn't. It was all managed well. And then since then, I become again someone that in the public eye, if they need someone to represent geeks in a positive light, you can, to show that there's nothing wrong with being a geek that loves studying full time. But I like trying to show the sort of the jovial side of being a geek.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've talked a bit about sort of the journey from University Challenge and sort of onwards, but I wonder if I can take you back. So you are famously an Oxford dropout. I wonder if you can tell the story of that.
Yeah, I can tell you that. So maybe I'll trace my story back a little bit further. Yeah. So I grew up in East London, went to a state school till I was 16, and then 16 I think was a big turning point in my life. I opened up the copy of the Times newspaper. I still read it to this day. And towards the back of the paper, there was an ad that said, are you a bright boy? I'm like, yeah, I'm a bright boy. Would you like an amazing 2-year opportunity? Yeah, I'd like one. How about considering a scholarship to Eton? And I sent off for an application form, went for an open day, went for interviews, and I got a 2-year scholarship to Eton. And again, that's a life-changing opportunity. One day I'm in East London on a council estate wearing Adidas, Reebok and Nike, which I still like. And the next day you're wearing a pinstripe suit with starch collar and rubbing shoulders with Prince Harry. Again, very, very surreal. And then so at Eton, the expectation is you end up at the very least a Russell Group, probably Oxbridge. I had a gap year, got an offer to Oxford to do maths. And I went to Oxford, had an amazing time, had a great time. But I think I had too much of a great time. I didn't do enough work. And at the start of my second year, I wasn't on course for a 2-1. And my ambition at the time was to get into investment banking as a trader. And the way graduate recruitment works, if you get a 2-2 or a 3rd from Oxford or Cambridge, it doesn't matter if it's Oxford or Cambridge, you're not getting past the front door. So I made the very difficult decision at the start of my second year to leave, and I went to Royal Holloway. And the reason I love bringing up the story is people, again, nowadays when they meet me, they'll be like, oh my God, Bobby Seagull, he's a genius and he's so successful. Look, he's never had to encounter difficulty. And I go, actually, I'm successful, but ask me why am I successful, and also ask me have I had to overcome difficulties. And again, I dropped out of Oxford. Again, I've got a great relationship with the college now, but things didn't quite work out for me when I was 18, 19, 20 academically. And I think it's a great example of how I think knockbacks happen to people, but it's how you respond to them that really defines who you are.
Nice. That's very inspiring. So you went to Royal Holloway, you got your degree, and then you ended up in a job in investment banking. Yeah, like, what was that like? And I ask partly because, like, I know a lot of people who are currently doing investment banking. Like, most of my friends who studied maths or economics have somehow ended up in the city doing investment banking, and I sort of get the impression that they don't really enjoy it, but they've got this sort of the golden handcuffs shackled to them, and they they get a taste of that dollar, and they can't go back. So what was that like for you?
Yeah, so again, in my late teens, early 20s, anyone that was back in the mid 2000s that was numerically qualified, they would tend to be drawn towards the city in the way in which maybe tech now draws people in. The city drew people in, and I wanted to be a trader. Again, I had an internship at Lehman Brothers, then I got the full-time job offer. And I'll be honest, when I joined the bank at 23, I thought, this is my career set. I'm going to be a managing director, a vice president by 28, managing director by 32, head of the London desk by 35, head of Europe by 45, CEO. Like everyone else, I had major ambitions, and that was my career path. That was the path, earning lots of money, still be hopefully still a nice person, but that was my path. And Lehman, if anyone's studied recent economic history, was not a good choice of bank to join. So on September the 15th, 2008, Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. To be honest, I did move to Nomura as a trader for a short while, but it made me really consider the instability of not just careers but life, because at that time I'd always thought, Oxford was a bit of a bump, but now I'm on a straight line path, a straight line trajectory. And after that, I think it's made me always be flexible in my approach, because again, after Nomura, I thought, even banking seems a bit insecure. So I went to PwC, did the sensible Indian thing, and got a qualification. My dad's very proud. I'm a chartered accountant. And some license to do your audits and tax returns to this day. So I did that. But again, the aim there was to become to work in private equity, run businesses. But I think when I joined Lehman, again, I don't say that I don't want to criticize people that go into banking, because again, I really enjoyed my job. It's just I found the skills and talents I have are better served in a different sector, in education now. But again, I had a thrill when I was at Lehman. You've got 8 screens, multiple headphones. You know what? I used to shave my hair off when I was at Lehman. I'll tell you the reason why. Because again, you can tell I like smiling. I'm a very positive guy. I'm only not positive when West Ham lose. Then I'm in a bad mood. Or England lose. I'm in a bad mood. But at Lehman, I told my boss on the first day, what's the ambition? I said, I want to be a managing director before I'm 30, around that sort of age. And he said, Bobby, you can, but stop smiling. You'll get taken advantage of. And I was like, oh, can't. That's me. So I kept my hair very short. So I pretty much used to, with a razor, shave it all off. And it sort of I looked a bit meaner. I mean, would you want to mess with a guy that was bald head? Not nothing wrong being bald, but a purposely shaven head.
Excellent. Okay. So you sort of like figured out your appearance to match the career trajectory that you wanted, which was managing director before the age of 30. Yeah. So how did that go? Managing director before the age of 30?
No, it didn't happen. So the Lehman went down. Then I moved to Nomura, and then I went to PwC. And then PwC again, it is still a corporate sector, and there my ambition was either become a partner or to move into private equity. A lot of people who work in private equity have a sort of accountancy business background. But the thing that I had my epiphany at PwC, I took a 3-month sabbatical to tutor new graduates joining the firm. And this was about a couple of months. And when I taught the new graduates, I really found myself coming to life. Again, I'll be honest, I enjoyed my corporate work, but teaching young people, and they were 20, 21, so they're not 10-year-old students, they're 21, 22-year-olds. I found I had a new lease of life, because by having to communicate ideas, albeit on balance sheets and profit and loss, I found I was really using my skill set of being able to communicate with people, empathizing with their difficulties, trying to encourage them to move forward. And that's what sort of got me thinking, what sort of career can you do this all the time, where you're explaining difficult ideas to younger people and inspiring them? Teaching.
Nice. Okay. So dropped out of Oxford, went to university, got a degree, ended up in investment banking and then management consulting, and you got PwC accounting. You got your accounting qualification. What was kind of the journey from then to sort of becoming a teacher? Like how did that work?
So there's a couple of parts to this story. So one is, I've always had an interest in education. So in my gap year at between school, so Eton and Oxford, I did 9 months working for KPMG. So again, understanding accounting, which is, I seem to have a lot of accounting in my career. But I spent a couple of months doing youth work in Muir House. And if anyone's ever seen the film Trainspotting, Muir House is in Edinburgh, and it's an estate where there's lots of drugs, lots of alcoholism, a lot of deprivation. Probably one of the most deprived. Again, I'm from Newham, which is historically seen as a deprived part of the UK, but Muir House is perhaps one of the most deprived in the whole of the country. And again, the children growing up, they have really tough backgrounds. So I spent a couple of months doing youth work, and at one stage, I had to help support drug addicts. And I was like, I've never even smoked. I don't think I've had a drink at this stage in my life. I'm not sure how I'm qualified, but again, my positive attitude, helped these younger people to find a connection. And then there, I had this sort of idea that actually I do connect with the young people, because again, it's my positivity, not that I've got any sort of skills or life experience that makes me qualified, but it's my positive approach to life. So then I thought, oh, education is something that's interesting. And then the next time education sort of appeared on the radar was with a couple of friends from Oxford. I set up a social enterprise called OxFizz that supports sixth form students applying to university, and that was in 2007. So I sort of moonlighted while at Lehman. So weekends, so Monday to Friday, earn money in the bank, and then weekends help sixth form students applying to university. And then I always thought, okay, education is interesting, but it was only after the PwC experience that made me think education. But I'll tell you that the story between going to PwC and being a teacher, I applied my corporate forensic skills. I'll explain how this is. So normally when people decide they want to change careers, they'll say, okay, I want to go to teaching, I'll go and visit a couple of schools. That's a sensible thing. I decided, okay, I'm going to teach in Newham, but I'm going to do this forensically. So I can't find the book here, but I wrote to every single school in my borough, about 30 schools. I visited every school initially for a couple of days. And then of these 30 schools, I liked about 5 to 10 of them. Those 5 to 10, I spent about a week in them. And then I narrowed that down. Of the 5 to 10, I spent about 3 weeks in 3 of the schools. And then eventually there's 2 schools left. I almost like doing a reverse job interview where I was making sure, one, I was doing my due diligence, because if I'm going to, I was about 30 at the time, if I'm going to really change careers, move to education, this has to be the final change, because I've been, an investment banker, then a chartered accountant, I ran my own social enterprise. If I'm going to teaching, I can't keep changing careers. I've got to make sure it's right. So I spent about 6 months visiting lots of schools, taking detailed notes, interviewing lots of teachers, doing practice lessons, and at the end of it, I was like, I'm convinced I want to be a teacher. And longer term, I want to teach in East London, because it's an area where kids historically they don't have great education, because it's a deprived, poor area, ethnic minority backgrounds, underprivileged children. So that sort of detailed, it was honestly my 6 months due diligence in education. Again, it was 6 months of unpaid work, because I was essentially visiting schools as a volunteer, but it really gave me the desire to be in education long term.
Okay, that's interesting. So it sounds like you kind of internally changed your identity a lot as you were sort of growing up, starting off with kind of math student, and then investment banker, and then accounting, and then sort of this social enterprise, and then education. One thing that I wouldn't say struggling with, but like sort of thinking about at the moment is, like, at the moment for me, my identity is very much tied up with the whole being a doctor thing. But a few weeks ago, I did one of these exercises where you kind of write down a list of everything in your day that makes you happy and fulfilled. And I kind of got about 25 items down on the list, and kind of looked up and realized that sort of being a doctor and sort of doing medicine, the day job, just was not on this list at all. And I was like, oh crap, hang on, this is kind of weird. And I asked because I've also got like a strong interest in teaching. Like I've been doing teaching of some capacity since like the age of 13, and it's always been one of the most fun things that I do. But I feel like I'm 26 at the moment, and I feel like my whole identity is tied up with being a doctor. Like, how did you kind of overcome the sort of the inertia of like sort of like holding on to a previous identity and deciding that that's what you then wanted to move, like to move on to something else, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and it does make sense. And I think identity is an important part of, again, who we are. And that's when we wake up in the morning. That's, we wake up in the body of being a doctor, or being a teacher. But obviously in my late teens, early 20s, I had foreseen a path of becoming a banker, earning lots of money, being financially successful. And I would say again, it's difficult to change your identity, and it never happened overnight. It was a slow, gradual process. Again, the different events were September the 15th, 2008, the Lehman collapse. Again, that made me really think, is Lehman the right place? And then when I joined PwC, I thought, okay, I'm being a bit more socially responsible. I'm now an accountant, help advising businesses rather than, rather than being a trader. And then at PwC, again, so that was a slight shift in my identity. And then at PwC, there are lots of new juniors joining. And then there, I taught the new graduates joining as a graduate trainer, as it were. And again, there was a shift in identity. So I would say is that what made it easier for me was there wasn't one single overnight event that made me say, hey, I'm going to be Bobby Seagull, Mr. Seagull, the teacher. It was a transformative process over many years. And again, when people meet me now, they one day assume, oh my God, you're so knowledgeable. Were you born ridiculously smart? Oh, you're born an educator. And obviously, people have talents. And again, one thing I'd love to chat about later is I hate the notion of people have talent, and that's why they're accomplished. I really believe we have talents, but it's what you put into it, the effort, the drive. And again, becoming a teacher, I did my 6 months due diligence to make sure it was the right profession for me. So again, my identity has changed. And again, when I wake up in the morning, whatever, depends if it's a weekday, maybe 6, if it's a weekend, 7, 8. I am, it's earlier than that, but I don't want to put people off teaching. I do wake up and think, yes, I'm Mr. Seagull, the teacher. But that has happened not overnight. It's gradually, step by step, where I've sort of internally changed, almost like a jigsaw puzzle, change bits around who I think I am.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I wanted to ask you about. So you did very well in University Challenge. You captained the Emmanuel College team. You also recently won the Celebrity Mastermind.
Yes.
I believe. Like, how did you get so good at general knowledge? Like, is it something you actively worked on, or is it just you somehow osmosisified all this knowledge over the year? Like, how? Yeah. How did it work?
Let me get a little prop. Let me get a prop for this. Hold on. So. This is related to this. So this is actually a model of my brain. Really, this is my brain here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So this was so BBC has a program called Horizon, science documentaries, and they did something called the Great British Intelligence Test. And the premise of the show was they want to look at whether people that are publicly known as smart have a different brain. So they actually scanned my brain under MRI, and essentially they had a script that said, oh, Bobby's really smart. We know he's great on University Challenge. And the reason is his brain is bigger. He's got more connections. And at the end of the show, after they scanned it, they found, A, my brain is smaller than average. And B, there's nothing special about it. And they're like, but we thought your brain was special. And again, this links to my general knowledge story. I don't think there's anything special about my brain that makes it conducive to knowledge. I think it's my life experiences. And again, growing up, my dad used to take myself and my siblings to East Ham Library, where we live, every Saturday afternoon. And we go, so normally my mum make a really delicious South Indian, so we're from Kerala, my parents are from Kerala, really delicious Kerala lunch, maybe some biryani and sambar, really delicious food. And then we go off to the library, and we'd sit there for 2-3 hours, sprawled on the floor, just reading books. Again, there was no objective. It was just trying to absorb the world. We read books on the Aztec civilization, Victorian engineering, the fiction of Roald Dahl. And it was these Saturdays reading that actually just developed my knowledge. So again, I wasn't born knowledgeable, but it's because I spent these hours in the library reading and reading. And there was, people, when I have conversations with, they can see that I bring in random bits of trivia from other parts. But I never really liked pub quizzes. And my embarrassing sort of admission is I'd never watched a single episode. Probably I never watched more than 30 seconds of University Challenge before I went on the show. Partly because I'd obviously sometimes turn up on the show watching it, and I'd end up on the section of biochemistry. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. So I just changed the channel. So I never got around to watching it. But when I was at Cambridge, I applied for the team. And again, I knew I had a good knowledge. And I got onto the college team. But then when I got onto the team, then I thought, actually, I'm on it now. Let's now try to train and prepare for it. Like you would do for an exam. Don't just leave it to chance. And again, I spoke to some previous contestants who've been on it. And they would say, oh, Bobby, you can't really, the knowledge you have, you can't really do much with it. That's what you have. And I'm like, no, surely you can improve and practice and develop. And again, with my team, we've got a massive Excel spreadsheet, looked at all the previous, last 3 years of matches, put a spreadsheet, all the different topics, astronomy, chemistry, biology, monarchs, capital cities, created a spreadsheet, allocated responsibilities, had books that we've revised from, spent a lot of time doing quizzes, competing against other colleges. So again, it was a really systematic, organized process that took me from someone that was knowledgeable, but being able to apply that knowledge in a specific condition of a quiz show. So again, there's a different thing being knowledgeable and being able to apply that in in the pressured environment of a quiz show like University Challenge. So it's deliberate effort, not genius that got me there.
Fantastic. That's really cool. So it was kind of this sort of implicit interest that you had in sort of like acquiring knowledge and the general knowledge that you gained from spending all those hours at the library when you were younger, which is not really something that was under your control. It was kind of the circumstance. But then you sort of off the back of that, you got onto this University Challenge team. But then at that point, you were like, okay, now this is where we apply the systematic effort, where we learn all of the Nobel Prize winners, all of the capital cities, all of the American presidents, and all of the things that make someone someone good at doing quizzes versus just good at general knowledge in general.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, the way I also see is, again, I'm one part of a team of 4. And what often people do is, they would be sensible and they'd say they're going to focus on reading, certain books on chemistry, make sure they learn the periodic table. Again, they'll learn all the monarchs, US presidents, and they'll focus on themselves. But I thought, okay, as a captain, I'm much more effective if I can capitalize on the strengths of my team. So again, it was a process of getting to become their friends, and they are my friends now, getting to understand their interests, and spending a lot of time in making sure that they were coached and supported. So advising them on what things to revise, what things to read. So it meant that rather than just relying on one, so often some of the best teams in University Challenge have a strong captain. But my emphasis was, let's make it a really strong team, because then we're so much more cohesive. And again, if anyone's watched my episodes, you would say Bobby had really strong knowledge. But the thing that made me stand out as a captain was, if we had, imagine a question came up, like for example, one question came up about French Davis Cup winners. And they said one of the players was named the Crocodile. And I was like, we had no idea. I didn't know any French Davis Cup winners in the 20s. And then when they said the Crocodile, I was like, they're telling the team, have you guys seen the Lacoste shirts? And we're like, yeah, we've seen that. And through a discussion, we thought that Lacoste was the name of a potential captain. And it was Lacoste. And it was a discussion with a team that led to that. So I think for me, it was realizing that obviously as an individual, I can do things, but I'm much more powerful if I leverage the skill set of other people as well. So that's what gave me the confidence to sort of develop my ability on University Challenge.
Oh, nice. Do you to what extent do you find that sort of general knowledge as a whole is kind of useful in your life beyond making you kind of good at doing quizzes? Because one thing that I have, so there's a lot of people in the tech startup type world who kind of rail against following the news, and I've kind of drunk this Kool-Aid, because I think, well, there's no point following the news, because if something major is happening, I'll find out about it somehow, and most aspects of the news are kind of day to day that will not actually make any difference to my life. But I think perhaps I go too far in the other direction, where I am sort of actively ignorant about a lot of world issues, and I've never quite been able to I'm sure there is probably value in being kind of well-read, well-versed, but what value do you find kind of in that? Has it impacted your life in any major way?
Yeah, so what I would say is that obviously there's trivia, and some trivia is trivia for the sake of it. For example, knowing that Romania and Chad have almost identical flags. That's not really going to be useful anywhere, having that bit of knowledge. But, for example, knowing that Nigeria has the Yoruba culture and the Igbo culture can be quite useful, because again, when I went to university, a few of my friends have a Nigerian background, and just as a conversation starter, when they say, oh, their parents have Nigeria, I'm like, oh, I've read about the Yoruba culture and the Igbo culture. And then people, I think they give you a bit more benefit of the doubt when you sort of understand a bit about them. So actually knowledge can be a way to sort of break the ice, because if I have a little bit of knowledge, again, you don't need to be a world expert. And there's almost like sometimes general knowledge people have a breadth of superficial knowledge, and I would say there's a benefit in that, but also there's a benefit in having that deep dive. You do need to have areas that you're a specialist in, but having a superficial knowledge of a wide range of things means that you've got an entry point into conversations. And I often notice this is really useful, not in a cynical way, but when you're at dinner parties or drinks parties and someone talks about they work in the tech sector, or they work in publishing, or they work as a teacher. If you have a breadth of knowledge, you can have that initial conversation. You can actually ask questions that are more informed and more insightful, and then people then respect you for that, and then you can form a friendship as well on that. So I actually found throughout my life having knowledge has enabled me to make friends, because not because I know everything about everything, clearly not, but because I've got a level of knowledge about a range of things, I have got that first conversation starter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like for me, there was a time in my third year where I was studying psychology, and so the way it works in medicine is that the first 2 years are very, very intense, and then for the third year you're doing a random subject and you have like one lecture a week and you have like gallons and gallons of spare time, and so I made a point in that year. I was like, you know what? I kind of want to become more informed about general knowledge. So I got a subscription to The Economist, and every week I would read, their World in Brief thing, and I would kind of Google everything that I didn't have like a mental model of in my head. So, for example, Estonia would come up, and I would be like, where the hell is Estonia? I know it's sort of in Europe, and I know it's something to do with tech because it's small and they're very progressive about citizenship. But okay, and then I would Google Estonia and read Wikipedia. I'd be like, oh, this is amazing. And I found that like for those few months where I was doing that, I felt kind of like plugged in to the world in a way I hadn't before. Like people would be talking about some, publishing battle between Amazon and Hachette or whatever that publisher is called. I'd be like, oh. Yeah. I know that exists, because I read about it in The Economist and started kind of following that trail. So kind of since then, I've sort of let that fall by the wayside because I don't know, I guess in my head I've kind of been like, oh well, the ROI of this isn't sort of immediately obvious. But I think you've inspired me to start taking more of an interest in world affairs.
So again, when you mention Estonia, I start thinking, oh, we've got the Baltic bloc, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Then we've got Tumpea Castle, which is probably one of the oldest serving castles that has a parliament since the 9th century. So again, my mind's whirring with little things I could chuck into a conversation. So again, so if you're Estonian, then you might go, oh, I live near Tumpea Castle, and I'll say, oh, I'd love to. So again, it's just like the little bits of knowledge that can help you form that first bond with someone.
Nice. So I wonder if I can take you back to something you said earlier. So you said that that you don't really believe in talent. What does that mean?
Yeah. So it's not that I don't believe in talent. Talent exists. So of course, in anything in life, I'm a mathematician. There's a normal distribution, whether it's heights, weights, intelligence. Of course, there are most people bunched around the middle. There are some people who have really learning difficulties, and other people that are clearly off the scale and that have photographic memories. But for the vast majority of us, it's not the talent that makes a difference. And again, I've got a book here by a lady called Angela Duckworth, and in my family we love books. Again, I've got so many books on the myth of talent. There's Bounce by Matthew Syed. I love Matthew Syed and Angela Duckworth. But in this particular book, she tried to understand what makes people successful. And if you went to the high street, any UK high street, anywhere in the world, and you ask people what makes someone successful, they'll say, it's talent, it's their natural ability. And of course there is one, but what she did was she said, I'm going to go and interview 3 different sets of people who all seem completely disparate. So she went to children doing spelling bees competition. So one, the one to stand up and say, spell onomatopoeia. Those kids. So really bright, bright kids, as it were. Then she went to teachers that were joining really tough schools. So in America, I think it's called Teach First in the UK, but I think it's Teach for America. So young 20-somethings joining tough schools. Then she went to people at, I think it's West Point Military Academy. So people joining the military. So these are 3 completely different fields. And she tried to understand what made them successful. And what she found, it wasn't necessarily talent while it played a part. It was something, she called it grit. And that was your passion and perseverance to a goal over the long term. And essentially her thesis was that, and let me show you, so again, I love finding it's not maths, but it's pseudo maths, as it were. So she said, there's an equation here which helps us to understand why people achieve. So she firstly said, talent multiplied by effort is a skill. And then skill multiplied by effort is achievement. So I'll go through what this means. So talent times effort equals skill. All that means is, so imagine, Coco Gauff, the young African-American tennis player that got to the Wimbledon semi-quarterfinals of 4th round at the age of 14 last year. She became the youngest person to win a women's tennis association event, and she's like 15 years old. So she clearly had a talent in terms of hand-eye coordination, seeing things, moving quickly, and that was her natural talent. But to become someone that could be good at tennis, the skill, she had to put in effort. She put in hours of training, hours and hours and weeks and months of sacrificing essentially probably her childhood to become someone with a good skill. So she had the talent and she put that effort in, and she had a skill, which is a tennis player, being a good tennis player. But that skill in itself is no use because you're not going to get a certificate saying I am a good tennis player. There you go, certificate. You might do, but that doesn't mean anything. So for her, it's about achievements. How can she achieve something? Again, her skill was she's now a good tennis player, But then she put in effort again. She sacrificed, normal kids would be put on Instagram posting lots of stories and out with their friends having parties. But she focused on developing that skill, going to lots of tournaments, traveling around the world. And then that resulted in the achievements, which is, being the youngest person to win a major non-Grand Slam event for the female circuit. And so when people look at Coco Gauff, they're like, wow, she's got, she's ridiculously talented. Look at her achievements. But actually, she achieved that because she put in effort. Again, talent times effort is skill. Skill times effort is achievement. And in these set of equations, effort counts twice. Of course, there's talent. That matters. But it's the effort you put in that really reaps the rewards.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So I've not read the book Grit, but I've heard so many people that I look up to kind of reference it that it's got to be added to the list. I've heard a lot of people recommend Bounce as well. Like, what's Bounce about? I've not read it.
Yeah, so I think Matthew Syed is a kind of a sports writer, author in the UK, and he's developed this whole public brand on the concept of talent not being the most important factor in success. So he actually himself, I think he's half Pakistani, half British. I think was his mother Pakistani? I'm not sure which one of the two. Obviously, he's either the mother or the father. And he was England's top table tennis player. And again, when people meet him, they think you must have, Matthew, you must have great hand-eye coordination, and you clearly had the limbs to become a table tennis player. And then he would refute that by saying, actually, obviously he had some sort of talent, but actually it was a set of circumstances that made him successful. And early on, he talks about the fact that his parents, for some inexplicable reason, they bought him a standard-sized table tennis table when he was very young. And again, how many kids have a standard-sized table tennis table? Then secondly, he had an older brother that was willing to play with him every single evening after school. Then at his own school, he had someone that was by complete coincidence, a coach for the England Table Tennis Association. Then again, another coincidence was he lived a couple of miles away from one of the most prestigious table tennis clubs. And a combination of all of this and hard work meant that he was someone that ended up becoming England's top table tennis player. Had the same person, Matthew Syed, been born in Edinburgh without access to that coach, without access to that table tennis club, he wouldn't have emerged. So of course he has talent, but he says it's a lot more than talent. Again, it's about being the right person, the right place, the right circumstances. Same thing about me and again, I'm now known to certain sectors or people in the UK as the smart guy, as the genius or whatever. But had I not been had Lehman not gone under, had I not gone to PwC and had that epiphany, had I not gone to Cambridge at a specific time, had I not gone to University Challenge, I would just be, that's unfair to say just a teacher. I would be a teacher in a school and that's it. But again, I had the right circumstances at the right time that gave me the break. And now people associate me for being a public man of knowledge. And again, for Matthew Syed, of course, you're talented, but you need lots of other factors to help you to get to be in a position where you are.
Okay, cool. So this kind of reminds me. So there's a book by Jim Collins, I think, called Good to Great. I don't know if you've come across that. That's one of the. It's a book that's often referenced in the context of kind of growing a business and how a business goes from good to great. And what he does is that he and his colleagues, they analyzed kind of loads of great businesses. For example, like Apple would be considered a great business, and Starbucks would be considered a great business. And they found the equivalent businesses that were around at the same time that we haven't heard of because they didn't become great businesses. And they tried to sort of create this pseudo equation, because I love pseudo equations as well. Try to create this pseudo equation for success. And they found that one of the factors in there wasn't actually luck. Because even the non-great companies had the same number of lucky events or lucky breaks, like however you want to call it. But it was actually it was a factor they called return on luck, which is to what extent can you capitalize on the sort of fortunate circumstances that you've kind of stumbled into. And in Matthew's case, I guess he capitalized well on the fact that he was well positioned to be a table tennis player. In your case, you got the springboard from University Challenge, but you didn't let that lead go to waste. You capitalized on it by doing all these things. And so I suspect if you look at all these kind of successful people, you would find that they have a high degree of return on luck rather than luck per se.
Oh, that's brilliant. Again, in my banking days, I'd heard of return on investment, ROI, but I've never heard of ROL. But that really is it, because I think the vast majority of successful people have had lucky breaks, but it's what they do with that little lucky break. Because it's no, it's all well and good and being suddenly having a platform. But if you don't do something with that, whether it's being in table tennis or education, or whether you're suddenly been given a platform from, a writer that you've been platform obscurity being, the Times Book of the Week. It's what you do with that. And again, so you get the luck, but can you make a return on there? So I'm going to add that to my list of things to tell the students on return on luck.
So this is actually something, and you mentioned before we started recording that you were thinking of potentially getting into YouTube and things like that. I think this return on luck thing is really important there as well, right? Because essentially it's a case of the more videos you make, the more kind of opportunities for luck that you put out into the world, and then occasionally one of them will go viral, and then there's almost nothing you can do to sort of manufacture a viral video in general. But once that happens, it becomes a case of, okay, how do you then capitalize on this increased attention? And at that point, what you have to do is you have to just keep on churning out the content. You have to figure out what makes people enjoy, like your content. You sort of really have to double down to capitalize, to maximize your return on luck. I think kind of the interesting part of that is like in all these other scenarios as well, is that the way that we can actually, there's an analogy for this that I like, is that you can never really control when luck happens to you, but you can maximize your surface area to allow luck to fully take hold. And there's a phrase which I came across in a podcast, which was when you're making decisions, you want to maximize randomness and optionality, because it's always sort of random events, like you going on university, ending up university challenge was a fairly random event, but sort of you want to kind of build your life in a way that gives you more exposure to these serendipitous events. And the way that I'm thinking about it now is that, like, the choice I'm making is, okay, for my further medical training, do I want to stay in Cambridge where I've been for the last 8 years, or do I want to potentially move somewhere else, maybe to London, maybe even abroad? And I think in terms of randomness and optionality, like, it is a no-brainer to leave Cambridge and expose myself in a non-weird way to these other opportunities. Because staying in Cambridge, it's like, it would be fun, it would be comfortable, I could become a supervisor at a college, but it's just, there's no randomness and optionality there. So that's another way that I think about sort of how we can actually get more luck events happening to us by increasing randomness and optionality, but B, once we have a luck event happen to us, we then sort of really pour fuel on the fire to kind of take advantage of it as much as we can.
I got to say, I've now in the last couple of years been used to doing lots of interviews and sometimes deep dive ones, but this is the first one where I'm actively taking notes in an interview. It's like I've got a side there.
Oh, nice.
So I'm learning into the grit because I feel like I'm learning a lot from you, Ali. So interesting how you talk when you mentioned about YouTube. Again, with my lucky break, the return on luck, I've maximized it and I've sort of become a mainstream in terms of conventional television. I get, my TV series, which is normal linear programming. But I've always thought, to engage young people, they're on the Instagrams and they're on the YouTube. That's the way you can really reach not just young people, but reach a much wider global audience. And I've always wanted to do YouTube stuff, but I've never found the time or the reason. But then in UK, I think March 23rd, we had lockdown. And for the first couple of days of lockdown, I'll be honest, I was a bit miserable because I was like, there's no school. I can't go to Cambridge anymore. And I think I binge watched some horrendous stuff on Netflix for a day after. Though I'll tell you later on about The Last Dance by Michael Jordan. We'll talk about that and the lessons from that. That's a valuable and worthy binge watch. But the stuff I watched March 23rd was not valuable and not worth reporting on. But so again, sort of late March, all my conventional events of meeting people, like again doing my public talks in schools, in my own school, education events, conferences, everything just like wiped clean, nothing there. My diary is suddenly empty for 2 months. So again, you can either go, which I did for a day and a half. I'll be honest, oh no, what's wrong? Everything's gone wrong, which I did do. Or you can think, what can I do about it? And I said, my dad actually was the one who said, Bobby, you've always wanted to do YouTube. What about now? Now's your chance. And I just said, okay, I'll do it. And then I sort of now, I've gotten to a schedule where I do 7 live broadcasts a week. I do 3 maths lessons, a history lesson, a geography lesson. I do 2 quizzes. And again, there's so many disasters that go on. A number of events where my sound's not working, the stream's not working, the Instagram goes down. So I'm clearly like an amateur doing it. And again, I don't really get many viewers right now. But at the moment, I'm consistently producing the output. And again, when you talked about randomness and getting almost like a lucky break. So when I was doing the YouTube streams, I had a call, or in fact, an Instagram DM from a lady called Oti Mabuse. And if you're British based, you probably recognize the name. So she is the star of Strictly Come Dancing. And she set up a scheme, I think back in mid-March, called the Home Festival, where she does with her Strictly Come Dancing friends like dancing lessons, singing lessons, baking, cooking, all the sort of extravagant, the cool entertaining stuff. But she said, Bobby, I've seen you on YouTube and you make educational programs. Can you get involved with us? And I was like, oh my God, you're literally one of my icons on television. And now I make educational output, again, for someone with a much wider platform. And again, that happened because I was producing daily content to maybe like 10 people watching it. It can be a bit demoralizing, but the thing is, with a small audience, you have such a, I know all the people, like there's Anna, there's Oscar, there's Millie, they always do the homework, they send me through it, and I've got a real personal relationship, and my quizzes, certain 10 families that take part. But again, at some stage I would like to build an audience for them, but it's about if you continue to produce the output, eventually I'm hoping I'll get a return on luck somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great way to think about it. And I think it's particularly hard for people you're big in the world of TV, and when you start YouTube, it's not like you're Will Smith and you suddenly got this audience that will just subscribe to you. And YouTube is like literally you're starting from scratch. And I know that a lot of people find it really hard because you're like a big name celebrity in the world of being a TV genius, but no one knows who you are on YouTube. But I think it's great how you're still just doing the whole churning out the content, right? Because it would be so I get so many emails from people being like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a YouTube channel, but realistically, how quickly can I expect it to grow, and when am I gonna get my big break? And I sort of reply with, okay, make 100 videos for the next 2 years and then come back to me and I'll give you some specific advice, because you've got to put in the reps. It's like, I'm sure this was mentioned in the documentary, but Michael Jordan didn't just get good at basketball. He shot zillions and zillions of hoops. You have to put in the reps, and it seems like that's what you're doing on your YouTube channel. Everyone go subscribe to Bobby's YouTube channel, link in the video description.
Oh, thank you. You've already made a significant shift. I think you've got 600 subscribers so far, not many. But one of the things that going into YouTube has really taught me has re-emphasized the importance of humility. Because it can be easy when I'm doing TV things and go oh, here's the guy from BBC, here's the guy that writes for Financial Times, and it can get to your head. But going to YouTube has taught me, again, I've always been someone that I'm always very grateful for where I am. I never think you should raise yourself by putting other people down. I think almost you should if you can bring other people up with you, that the party's better with lots of people at the top. But YouTube has taught me, actually, I've got so much to learn, because in mainstream communication, I feel really confident on a live TV interview or doing a broadcast or doing a piece to camera. But YouTube's a different world, and it's reminded me, actually, being humble and asking people advice, asking people for help is a great way of learning. Because again, whatever sort of avenue you used to almost try and go down, there are other people out there who've are more successful, people that have been doing it for many years, and it's reminding me, actually, asking other people for help is a great thing, and that's the way that you can improve yourself. Don't just think, oh, I'm great because I've come from this other platform. Be humble and have humility, and I think that goes a long way as well towards being successful.
Nice. So what's your content strategy on YouTube, if we can call it that? Where are you sort of hoping to take it? And if you can just kind of give us some context, what sort of stuff have you been doing on YouTube so far, and sort of where do you want to go?
Yeah. So I've almost tried to extend what so the platform I use most consistently is probably Twitter. And again, the content I use on Twitter will tend to be about maths, education more generally, and then the last 6 to 12 months, a lot of football related stuff, because I become an ambassador for the Premier League. When I won Celebrity Mastermind, there's general knowledge, but my specialist topic was England at World Cups. I even beat England manager Gareth Southgate on a quiz about England.
Nice.
The football. So it's they're my brands, quizzing, education, football. They're my public brands. And with YouTube, obviously, you get to control the content. You get to produce how much output. Because obviously, with my mainstream stuff, with the Premier League, they'll tell me, Bobby, do this content, and I'll have to do that. Do it in 3 months. I don't get to choose when it happens. When the BBC, again, my new series is currently on. The final episode is coming on Monday. But the next series 3, again, they'll tell me when it's being filmed. I don't really have much of a say. Whereas with YouTube, I thought, okay, I've got my personality in terms of my education, in terms of my quizzing, in terms of my football, and I'm going to produce output on that. So again, I do maths with Bobby. I almost model that with so Joe Wicks obviously is a huge star, PE with Joe. So I sort of slightly borrowed his idea, and I became #maths with Bobby. I do maths lessons for school children, and then I also do, again, when I have that lucky break with Oti Mabuse from Strictly, so I do geography and history classes, But again, I leverage of her brand because theirs all about dancing. But in my classes, again, I had a class last week on the Vikings. And then, actually, I'll pick a better example. Vikings, ancient Greeks. I did a class on ancient Greeks, looking at the culture, looking at the language, looking at some of the numbers in their civilization. But then I did a dance. Every lesson has a dance. I'm not good at dancing. I'm horrendous. But because it's part of their brand, so now when young people come along with their parents, they're like, oh, Bobby's teaching us about the ancient Greeks, but he's really fun. And he's happy to make himself look like a fool by doing a dance. Like when I did a class on Nigeria, I did a traditional Nigerian dance. I did a class on, on Italy, I did the Tarantella dance. So again, it's trying to bring education, but a fun way of learning. And then with the quizzes, again, the quizzes were a bit demoralizing earlier when I had like 5 people, literally with my cousins, my uncle, and my brother on the quiz. And like, well, I spent like 5 hours preparing this quiz, and there's 3 people on it. But slowly I'm getting people doing it. But again, so it's like, there's the education, so that's the geography, history more generally. Then there's the maths, which is obviously the key public perception, public brand. And then there's the quizzing and football. So it's like they're the strands I'm trying to push out. I'm not sure which one will be the one that I will end up being successful for on YouTube, if any. But I just keep on pushing out content. And there have been times I've been tempted to throw the towel in because I do live streams every day apart from Sunday. Today, I'm with you. Yeah. So it is hard work, but it's just I've now got into a bit more of a rhythm of it. I know what I'm doing. I can produce output with less effort. Initially, my first live streams, I like rehearsed it and practiced it and spent a whole day and I was like, okay, that's not sustainable. So I know what I want to do, but I'm still willing to be open. If I realize something's got no traction and there's something else, maybe I'll change tactics. But it's maths, education more generally, and the quizzing side with football.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we've got a question from the chat. I've lost the person who asked it now, but they said that how do you know when something is not working and sort of when to throw in the towel? And I think kind of this ties in nicely with what you were just talking about. Like with YouTube, you've been doing these daily live streams, and it seems like it hasn't yet got the kind of traction that you would like it to get to sort of for you and yourself to sort of feel that okay, I'm a successful YouTuber as part of your identity. So how, just like in general, how do you think about sort of when to give up with things if they're not working? For example, with Oxford and dropping out, like that's a clear example of you giving up with that. Like, what's the thought process that you use for those sorts of decisions?
Yes, it's a great question. Because often sometimes there's a public misconception that if at first you don't succeed, you try again, and there's an element of that early on. But at some stage, if you keep trying something and it's not working, I think you need to make the decision: is it the right area for me? Again, for example, Oxford. At the end of my first year, early start of my second year, I realized that because I'd not done enough work, it was difficult to progress and get that 2-1 or first. And I said, okay, I'm going to make a clean decision. It wasn't easy, but I made a decision to leave Oxford. Other more recent things, again, with YouTube, I think it's having people around you that also are willing to be a mirror to you. Because sometimes when we're by ourselves, we might think actually luck is around the corner. Maybe my moment's going to turn. But you could have someone like a brother or a dad or a mom that says to you, I've been seeing you've been struggling with this for months and months, for years. Maybe try something else. So maybe having an external viewpoint, and that's actually maybe relates to another bit of like advice I always tell people: consult, talk to people. Because obviously we develop the faculty to have that monologue with ourselves, but someone else externally can have that fresh perspective that you can't have. And again, I don't know if it's a great analogy, but often with my PowerPoints for my events, so my quizzes, I'd have prepared it, but there'll be a really simple, silly mistake that I've not noticed because I've seen the PowerPoint 10 times. I can't notice the fact that there's a spelling mistake, really obvious one that makes me look incompetent. But my dad will come and look at it after 1 second and say, that says section 2, but you haven't even done section 1. Why have you put section 2 there? And again, someone with a fresh perspective can come and say, actually, maybe this area isn't working for you. So I think make sure you got people that are your sponsors, whether it's your family, your partner, a work colleague, that can give that fresh perspective. They can say to you, hey Ali, hey Bobby, I've been seeing you reading YouTube on this football quiz, but you got 3 people for 2 years now. Maybe you should do something else. So having someone else that's willing to say to you, maybe cut it here, is useful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing that I use, like on top of those sort of metrics for deciding whether to sort of throw in the towel, is I kind of ask myself, how much am I enjoying this? Because when it came to kind of making YouTube videos at the start, obviously when you're starting anything, you basically have no one watching your videos, and I'd be like, oh my god, yes, I've got 74 subscribers now, and I've got sort of 18 views on my video, and it was like a good feeling.
That's me right now.
But like I was still like really enjoying the process of making the videos, and just sort of I think it's sort of like people view cooking. People say that when you get good at cooking, it's like, you know, you get the ingredients and then sort of within 2 hours you've turned it into a creation, and you get this sort of, you know, we as humans, we just love to create stuff. And so I sort of felt that with videos. And so whether it was kind of YouTube videos or learning how to code, or, you know, I dabbled with like trying to learn how to draw and things like that, I've always like really enjoyed the process of learning the thing. And so people often ask me, you know, how do you have the motivation to do it? And I'm like, well, you don't really need motivation. We only need motivation to do the things that we don't find enjoyable.
Yeah.
And so as long as it's enjoyable, then that's absolutely fine. Your camera's gone. Oh, it's back.
Okay. So actually on that, my dad often says to me, process is key. It's like, obviously when we enter a new project, a new venture, we have an end goal in sight, you know, whether it's to pick up X number of subscribers, or to be the top in your class, or to get that promotion, or to write that article or blog. But if you're solely driven by the end point, when you get there, you're like, is that it? Is that, you know, oh, am I visible? It seems
yes, you're visible.
Oh, good, okay. We forget that actually it's not just the end point. Actually, it's the journey. It sounds really cliched, but actually,
it's a journey.
You have to enjoy the journey, because again, when I had my TV show the first time, I'm like, oh, I've got a TV show. But then if you're just living off that particular moment, that's not very satisfying. I think it's, you got to enjoy what you do, the hard work behind, again, you know, for your YouTube, getting the cameras and finally getting something, oh, it's great resolution, or you finally found a speaker that, or a microphone that works. Enjoying those little victories, because that's what we remember, rather than the end point. Because it can be very hollow. Because if you're at the top of Everest, it's great, but then you got to get back down or find somewhere else. Actually, the Jordan documentary, in the Michael Jordan documentary, Last Dance, the coach, again, you know what? I don't like basketball. I knew nothing about Michael Jordan, but I watched his documentary, and I've never been as compelled. My brother mocks me now, saying, because he's like, I'm a Jordan worshipper. My phone ring, my morning phone alarm is now the Chicago Bulls introduction, because that gets me pumped up. And I never knew anything about Chicago Bulls, but in the documentary, Phil Jackson's the coach of the Chicago Bulls, and he's won the NBA twice. Again, these are things I did not know about 3 days ago, but he won the NBA twice as a player, 5 times as the coach of the Bulls, and I think possibly another 6 times as the coach of the LA Lakers. And he said, you're only as successful as your most recent success. So you get that hoop in, you win that NBA, you win that ring title, great, enjoy that, but you need to move on to the next thing. Don't just live in that moment. And that's why you got to enjoy the journey. If you're enjoying the journey and the process, you're always striving to get better, rather than just like, yeah, I got my own TV show, look at me. No, try and keep building on things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like one of the song lyrics that I love most about this is Miley Cyrus's "The Climb," where she says, "It ain't it ain't about how fast I get there, ain't about what's waiting on the other side. It's the climb." And every time I hear that, I'm like, "Oh, mate, Miley, you've got it down. Whoever wrote that song, I don't know if it was you, but that's like
it's one of my favorite. I love that song, by the way.
It's so good." So there was another thing I wanted to ask, and so you mentioned that you're quite content to look a bit foolish by kind of trying to do some kind of dance on camera. Mm-hmm. I imagine if you were to poll most people on the streets, and actually most people in this chat, and say, all right, how would you feel about making a YouTube video where you're dancing and you're not very good at dancing? Most people would have that like, ugh, it's a sort of feeling. But like one of my favorite quotes is from Epictetus, and he says, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish. And I think that, you know, if there's anything that I can attribute, like for me personally, whatever shred of success I've had, it's like success, I hate the word success, but like whatever shred of success I've had, a lot of it is down to being fully content to be thought foolish. Things like you're sort of making YouTube videos and going around with a big ass camera in lectures is a bit weird. People look at you like what the hell is this guy doing? And so how do you develop this attitude of being content to be thought foolish?
Interestingly, I would say, like many things, that approach is a skill. I definitely wasn't born like that. I remember when I was in primary school, secondary school. I'll give you one example. So when we were in secondary school, I think I was about age 12 or 13, and there was like a mock election going on in the school. And I put myself for leader of one of the parties, and we had to give our speeches, but they only had a fixed amount of time, so you had to put your hand up if you want to deliver a speech. And I chickened out of giving a speech because I was too afraid that my speech wasn't good enough. I'd deliver the content, and people would get booed. I wouldn't win any votes. So I said nothing. I was silent, and I always look back at that as an example of I wasn't willing to take a risk, because some of my friends who talked, they had horrendous speeches and they looked foolish, but they got votes. I didn't say anything. I just stood there thinking, oh, my speech isn't perfect. It's not good enough. And I've always used that moment when I was 12 or 13 as a driver to say, you'll never be like that. And again, I've had moments where I've chickened out since then as well, but I think be willing to put yourself out there. And I think when you do put yourself out there, and you not that you should make yourself look foolish on purpose, I think people give you more respect because they're like, he's willing to put his risk sort of reputation on the line. Again, the dancing, every lesson, I look horrendous, I look silly. Even on my quizzes, before every round, I do like a 10-second dance. And people, I think it shows humanity, because people don't want to see machines and robots. Again, when people are sort of know that I'm knowledgeable, they often think, Bobby must be a quiz machine, reading out capitals and periodic table elements and Nobel Prizes. And then I think if someone comes across like a machine that knows everything, all powerful, we don't really connect with them. So in a really bizarre, cynical way, I think showing your humanity and the fact that you can make mistakes and that you're willing to learn makes people warm to you. So actually, I think it's an attribute that means that people are willing to buy into you and support you on your journey, on your climb, as it were. So actually, being foolish actually pays. There's a return on investment in being foolish. Return on foolishness, ROF.
We've got return on investment, we've got return on luck, we've got return on foolishness. Oh, mate, I'm going to write that down. Return on foolishness.
I've never thought about that, but I'm going to say that.
This is some good stuff. Okay, I'm going to push back against you a little bit on that front. So, you're a teacher, so you deal with students. I get a lot of emails from students being like, hey, I want to start a YouTube channel, I want to start a blog, but I am really worried what people in my school are going to think. People are going to eviscerate me for willing to, sort of like, I imagine, have you seen High School Musical?
I've seen, honestly, I love musicals. I know about Zac Efron. I've seen bits of it. I've seen a breakup scene on the bridge, but I've not watched it. But I know bits of it.
Oh, man. Okay, right. So in High School Musical, which I only discovered when I was in like my third year of med school at the age of 21, which was like sort of 7 years after everyone else kind of discovered it. But in High School Musical, in High School Musical 1, the story is that Zac Efron is like, this jock basketball player dude, but he also enjoys singing and wants to sing in like the school musical. And there's this whole like scene where there's this whole song where they talk about what's it called? Someone in the chat like remind me of the song. It's called "Stick to the Status Quo." And it's all it's about all these kind of like the different groups of students are like in the different bits of the school being like, hey, I'm one of the math nerds, but actually I like baking as well. And then she gets sort of trodden down by the other math nerds being like, no, stick to the status quo. And you get sort of Zac Efron is like, hey, I'm the basketball player, but I want to sing. And all the basketball players are like, no, dude, stick to your lane, like do your thing. Mm-hmm. And like one of the sort of major messages of High School Musical 1 is that it's absolutely okay to kind of not limit yourself based on sort of this sort of group that you've kind of found yourself in. So that's kind of a lesson from that I always like to sort of refer people to. And I wonder if you have any advice that you would give to people of, let's say, secondary school, high school age, who want to do something, but they're worried about what their friends will think. And this is like such a universal problem across the human condition.
Yeah. So my brother he gets like a blog called The Daily Stoic. And it's inspired by the thoughts of yes, and I think some of it's inspired by the thoughts of Marcus Aurelius. And if you've seen Gladiator, the film, it has Commodus, and Commodus is who's Joaquin Phoenix, who's the Joker recently, and I think he's a bit misportrayed in the film. But his father is Marcus Aurelius, who wrote the famous Meditations, and in one of his works, he talks about how we over worry about what people think about us. Again, he was saying that when he'd come back triumphant through Rome and he's thinking about how does he look, how's his hair, I'm simplifying it slightly, but are people going to be concentrating on his achievements? And then he gets really worried and thinks, I should be really concerned about what people think about me. But then when people go home, they've got their own worries, they've got their own things to worry about. They're not worried about you. In that moment they might do, but if you made a mistake doing a speech or playing a sports game, the reality is most people, either they haven't noticed, or B, they're so worried about themselves that you shouldn't be worried about yourself at that particular moment. So I think it's, again, when I do stuff on television, I make a little fluff, and I told my dad, oh, I fluffed this thing up where I said something wrong or incorrectly, and my dad's like, oh, you didn't notice. I think the reality is where we notice all the micro issues that we have, but unless it's maybe your partner or your dad, other people don't notice. There's not, I mean, in a nice possible way, they don't care because they've got their own things to worry about. So I think we shouldn't get so concerned about other people. Do what you need to do your jam. And actually, I've got a great, slightly off piece, but this helps to put our worries into context. So there's an author called Carl Sagan, one of the most famous, is it come across?
Yeah,
Carl
yeah.
Sagan, okay. One of the greatest, I guess, cosmologists of the 20th century. And there's a famous picture of the Voyager spacecraft that it took off our solar system. So I think it was about 1990, in fact, 14th of Feb. I know. Sometimes I say, I think it was, and I need to learn to just be confident and say, it was 14th of Feb, 1990. And Voyager was about to leave sort of the grips of our solar system, but towards the edge of our solar system, and it's turning around, and it took a picture, and on this picture, there was a sort of almost like a beam of light. And in this beam of light, there's a little dot, literally 0.12 of a pixel. And that 0.12 of a pixel was our planet Earth. And this is a good way of helping us to think about perspective, because when people are worried about in high school or secondary school, or what are people going to think of me, this perspective really makes everything feel amazing. So imagine that little dot, the little speck, 0.12 of a pixel, and that's Earth. And it says, for us, it's different. Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you've ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering. Thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines. Every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The last sentence says, the earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena.
Oh, nice.
And it's just we get so worried. We live in a little speck of dust, 0.12 of a pixel. And we get so worried about what our hair looks like, what someone's gonna comment on our YouTube channel, what our friend will say. Honestly, don't worry about it. It's like that we're insignificant in the big scheme of things. Just do what you need to do in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So I've got a nerdy question for you.
Okay.
I noticed that you're very good at picking up kind of quotes from books, and I kind of get the impression that, for example, if you're like interviewed on podcasts or even in conversation, that you often kind of being like, oh, there's a great quote from this book by Angela Duckworth, and she says blah blah blah. Do you have a process for like taking notes from books that you read, or is it a case of that you just sort of happen to remember stuff? Like, what's your?
It's a combination of the two. Of course, I'd say one. I'll go through the sort of rigorous process behind it. I'm just going to remember to write that, the process, but also the way in which I build up the knowledge. So again, I've got lots of, again, before this conversation, I was like, oh, I've got a few quotes I want to share, and I got the books ready, had the quotes out. But with knowledge, again, these are obviously quotes that I had somewhere stored in my head. And with knowledge, the way I see it, it's almost like a spider's web. The more knowledge you have, the easier it is to accumulate more knowledge. And I'll give you one example. If I gave someone a list of numbers to memorize, imagine I said, can you memorize for me 1, 9, 1, 4, 1, 9, and 3, and 9. So I use a random string of 8 numbers. Most people could probably hold it like 1, 9, 1, 4, 1, 9, 3, 9. But if I told you they're the dates of World War I and World War II starting, 1914, 1939, you've got it in an instant. It's because, again, we have knowledge of numbers, but we've got knowledge of other things like history and dates. And the more knowledge you have, the easier it is to learn new things. So like I find that, again, if you know about kings and queens of Britain, if you're learning about kings and queens of Spain, because you've got the knowledge in the contemporary context, it's easy to learn about that. If you know about chemistry, then it's probably easier to learn about biology because they're interlinks. So I think with knowledge, it is a virtual cycle. The more you know, easier to learn new things. And again, with quotes, the more quotes I learn, the easier to pick up new things because I can make comparisons again. For example, when we talked about talent earlier, because I was thinking talent, oh, I know about Angela Duckworth. Oh, I also know about Matthew Syed. Oh, I know about this person. So again, it's the linkage. But with quotes, when I read books, what I'll tend to do is I'll tend to underline things that really strike my sort of, I guess, pique my interest. And then if I'm really good, I'll try to like maybe write up a couple of things, quotes, maybe in a Word document or in an Excel document or in an email doc. And then I'll try and share things with people. I'll tell my dad. In fact, I'm sometimes a bit annoying because if I find something interesting, I'm always wanting to share with people. I know sometimes my brother's like, Bobby, stop oversharing. But I think if you share with someone else, it's almost like if you want to learn something, explain to someone else. If I find a great quote, I'll go and tell my dad, I'll tell my brother, I might share it on Twitter. So I think it's the concept of having something and wanting to share with someone else that solidifies that in your head. So it's like you do have to take notes, again, fold pages, underline it. You've got to do the hard graft. But then once you've done that, it is a snowball effect. The more you learn, that snowball at the start is just a little few bits of snowflakes. The more you have, it just becomes like a torrential power, immovable force. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think like this is how I think of kind of note taking in this sort of context as well. In that, the more you can connect stuff that you're learning to stuff that you already know, the more it sticks. And this applies, whether we're studying for an exam or if we're just sort of kind of picking up knowledge about the world in general. And so I find that for me, I also sort of quote from a lot of books and podcasts and other kind of thinkers because it sort of tends to connect with stuff that I've read about. The other thing is that 2 years ago, like just over 2 years ago, I started writing a weekly email newsletter. That's something that you should do. Have you got like a mailing list, an email newsletter, by the way?
No,
that is something that you've got to get on. It's all about building the mailing list, and so then you have this sort of personal connection with kind of your followers and stuff. But that's an aside. I kind of drank the Kool-Aid from all of these sort of like influencer type people about how the importance of building up your mailing list. And so for the last 112 weeks, every Sunday I write a weekly email newsletter where I kind of share a few thoughts I've been thinking about that week, along with some interesting articles or books that I've read that week or podcasts. And then I'll have like a quote of the week, which is a quote that I pick up from my Kindle that I've been thinking about, and I kind of link to my that week's videos. But I found that through the process of forcing myself to write this email newsletter every week, it forces me to interface with and sort of reflect on the stuff that I read, because I'm constantly thinking, oh shit, I need to write an email this Sunday, like I've got to write one today. But I read something like a few days ago about sort of so today's email is going to be about kind of my views about listening to audiobooks and podcasts at double speed. And that was just something that I stumbled across in a tweet and then read an article about. But then sort of because I had the mindset of, I need to share this on Sunday, it sort of makes me engage with the topic a bit more. So I really like what you said about sort of when you read interesting things, you share it with the people that you know. Another thing I've started to do is that anytime I listen to a podcast, I have a rule for myself that I have to write at least one tweet talking about what I learned from that podcast. Because if I can't even think of a single tweet of something I learned from that podcast, then it was a waste of time. And so just taking those few minutes afterwards to really kind of try and active recall the contents of it really helps me absorb everything a lot better.
Yeah, no, I totally agree about the concept of that, getting that one tweet or one message. Again, if I watch something on television now, I often I'm watching because I want to enjoy it, but I need to have one comment I could say about it, usually as a tweet. Otherwise, obviously it's great that you can internally enjoy something. Again, Last Dance, I loved it, but now from the Last Dance by Michael Jordan, I now have lots of quotes, ideas about motivation, determination, resilience, overcoming failure that I can now bring into conversations with other people. So absorb something, but then be able to reflect it back and share that experience with other people.
So on that note, you mentioned Last Dance a few times. I've not yet watched it, but your like recommendation has now sold me. What are, say, like 3 kind of key insights that you took away from that you think kind of people in general could benefit from? And I suppose sort of what are some things that you would tell your students, like that you learned from that documentary?
Okay, the first one I would say is that Michael Jordan is universally acclaimed, according to the Wikipedia website, as the greatest basketballer of all time. Perhaps be the greatest sportsman of all time. Probably, he's right up there. And the first lesson I sort of took away from that was he had a single-minded determination to succeed. And I think, obviously, we don't need to, because Michael Jordan was perhaps ruthlessly determined. We don't need to be ruthless like him, but the determination, because he had obstacles, he had times where people doubted him, people trash talked him. They said that he's never going to make anything of the Chicago Bulls franchise, but he was like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. You know, when he joined a high school team, they said, you know, he's about 6'5", 6'6", which is actually quite short for some of the big basketballers. Like on his team, he was the shortest on the Chicago Bulls team at one stage. There were guys 6'7", 6'8", 7'2", and they were saying you can't be the main player on a team if you're only 6'5", 6'6", which just sounds ridiculous. But so he said, I'm going to prove people wrong. So he had that determination to prove people wrong. And the second one is, you can't do it by yourself. You need a team around you. So he is obviously a phenomenal basketball. He was, one nickname here was the glove, because he could actually hold, you know, the basketball. He could like hold a basketball with his fingers, which no other person could do. So he also had a great sense of talent, but he wouldn't win an NBA championship by himself. A basketball team needs 5 people. So he relied on other people and he motivated others. Sometimes bullied people a bit, which, you know, I'm not advocating, but he motivated and pushed others to be the best they could be. And I think whenever you're trying to achieve something individually, whether it's people want to do it through YouTube or be a writer or be a doctor or a teacher, you need other people to be part of your journey. So don't underestimate that. Even though he had single-minded determination, he needed to be part of a team to achieve that. And then the third story, I think it's about overcoming. We all have setbacks. Again, different people have different levels of setback. One for him was, so he'd won 3 championships from 91 to 93. I think it's the great thing about all these stuff about, so just a quick aside is, honestly, I knew almost next to nothing about basketball 3-4 days ago. Next to nothing. I knew Jordan was famous. I could tell you nothing about him. And now I'm almost like a disciple. My brother mocks me saying, my other brother was speaking to us, and then one of them was saying, ask him about who his favorite sports person is now. And he's mocking me because I absolutely love Jordan. I must have got slightly distracted about my point. But what was I got distracted by Jordan's myth. So I talked about the single-minded determination. I talked about the teamwork. And the other one is overcoming difficulty, sometimes grave difficulty. So with Michael Jordan, he led Chicago Bulls to 3 championships, 91, 92, 93. And now at this stage, people are saying this guy probably is the greatest basketballer. And then his father was brutally murdered in the end of the 93 season. And his father had been with him at every step, every championship. His dad was there. And he left basketball, went away to try and become a baseball player. And some people thought we'd never see him again in basketball, you know, the greatest talent and the most talented player ever to emerge in the field. And to have to deal with, you know, something, again, hopefully most of us will never deal with anything as horrendous as your father being murdered. But he dealt with that, and he used that to say, I'm going to try and make my father proud from looking on up there about my new achievements in basketball. So he came back and did it all again. And there's a great quote, I think from the If poem by Rudyard Kipling. If you can, pitch and toss all your winnings in one heap and lose, and not breathe a word of your loss and start again, equivalent-wise. And he did the same. He became the greatest basketballer, then left for 18, 21 months, and came back. And he was, when he first started, he wasn't very good because he'd changed his body from being a basketballer to being a baseball physique. And he had to work hard, train again, and got himself up to being the best basketballer again, winning 3 championships. Again, see, he obviously had it in there, but he had to build again. So I think the message is one of about having a single-minded determination, thinking about being part of a bigger entity than yourself, and then thirdly, being prepared to return from sort of failure and obstacles, and thinking you can, you know, if you fall off your horse, whatever it is, your proverbial horse is, you can get back on that horse again.
Very nice. Okay, I will definitely be watching this. So I noticed on your bookshelf you've got your book, The Life-Changing Magic of Numbers. Yes. That's good. A product placement right there next to your university challenge.
It does, yeah.
So I want to write a book at some point. How did you go about it?
So, and this is where an example of be prepared to be imperfect, because I think often when people want to write a book or want to set up a YouTube channel or set up a blog or newsletter, they often think, I'm going to wait for the perfect moment, all the circumstances, all the stars will align for you. And the reality is the stars will never align for one to write a book or one to have a YouTube channel. You've got to make the most of your circumstances. Again, after University Challenge, I thought I've got a great story about my journey, about how numbers influenced me. I want to write it. And then when I got into sort of writing a book, I then had the TV series emerge. And they said, we want to get you filming for a TV show. It'll take about a month, 6 weeks. And that was exactly when I wanted to write the book. And I thought, oh no, this is it. This is the summer I was meant to write the book, and now I'm not going to be able to write the book. And it meant that I was filming during the day, so like from 7 a.m. to 6, 7 p.m. And then in the evenings, the only time I would have to write the book. But I would force myself, again, it wasn't great stuff I was writing, but I would force myself to sit there for 2-3 hours, write stuff. And the key thing is to have the discipline to just be there in front of the keyboard, writing away. And again, it doesn't have to be beautiful prose. You're not going to have to be Shakespeare or Kipling, whoever your author of choice is. Just write stuff. And then also you can come back and edit it. And I think the lesson I learned was the bits of writing that I thought was horrendous afterwards, I got rid of it. But just producing, being consistent. Being consistent is better than being inspired, because consistency wins the day all the time. Like you talk about YouTube, just producing the output again and again, having those 100 to 200 videos. The same with writing, produce thousands of words. And you can always cut it, but have the words there in the first place. Don't think, people often think, I'm going to try and craft the most beautiful sentence. You spend a month trying to craft a beautiful sentence. Just write stuff and then edit it later. So that's the only advice I can say. Just get it out there. Be prepared to be perfectly imperfect.
Ooh, perfectly imperfect. That's very nice. So for the last 10 days or so, 10 days ago, I set myself a challenge that I was going to write 1,000 words every day. And I've been hitting 1,000 words plus each day. It's just been great. Nice. But I think a big part of getting that has been there's an acronym that I came across from this guy called Safi Bakal, who wrote a book called Loon Shots, something like that. He was interviewed on Tim Ferriss's podcast. But his acronym for writing is FBR, which stands for fast, bad, wrong. And that is what a first draft should be. So he says at the top of every page, he writes FBR, fast, bad, wrong. And then it gets him into the mindset of knowing that, right, this is just my first draft. It's going to be fast. It's going to be bad. It's going to be wrong. I'm going to write it anyway. And so now, for anything I write, whether it's planning a video or writing a newsletter or now trying to write a series of articles for this book, I just think, okay, FBR, just got to get words on the page and I can always correct them later. And I still find it really hard. I'm like, I can kind of go back. But, I think you're definitely right. It's just about sort of spewing out the words, and then you can sculpt it into something a bit more legit later on.
I'm going to put the FBR on my whiteboard. I love that. So often when I do talks in public, I write one thing down. I'm very energetic. I speak very quickly. And I think it's partly because my parents' native language, although I was born in Britain, is Malayalam. It's a very fast language. So growing up, I would hear a very fast language, and South Indian languages are very quick. So speaking English, you're going to be a lot slower and more measured, especially if you do public work. So I write down STFD, slow the beat down. So I'm going to add FBR for my writing as well. Fast, bad, wrong.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I've been doing without ever realizing, without giving it that sort of moniker acronym. Because it is, just get something down, write that speech, do the video. If you're trying to be perfect, you're going to be spending ages. Again, Michael Jordan, he'd get on the court and just practice, throw again and again and again. He'd be the first person there, last person out. Again, Cristiano Ronaldo. I love sports analogies because Ronaldo isn't perhaps the most gifted footballer. Again, I don't want to get... In my school, if you bring up Ronaldo and Messi, you're opening up a whole can of worms. But you don't want to do that. But although I can acknowledge that Messi is a more gifted footballer, I love Ronaldo more because Ronaldo is an example of someone that has clearly talents, but he built up his body. Again, he worked in the gym. He spends hours training, the first person there, last person out. He's made himself a great footballer by practicing again and again and again and again. Again, there are times where his free kicks were horrendous. He had these skills on the pitch that were just useless showboating, but now he's made himself a ruthless machine. Not that you need to be ruthless, but to be the best version of yourself is being willing to take risks and try again and again and again and be that fast, bad, wrong. Which people like Jordan have done, and Jordan obviously is ridiculously talented. But Ronaldo is an example of the fact that he's even considered among the greatest footballers, when I don't think he's anywhere near the most talented footballers of all time, but he's put in the graft. He's practiced his free kicks again and again. And now when you see his free kicks, they're like bullets, they're machines, they're amazing. But he wasn't like that early on in his Man United days. He was not good at all at the very grandest level of things.
Nice. Yeah, man, I'm loving the football examples. Football is one of those things where I've never quite gotten into it, but it's one of those things where I know I should get into it because people who can talk about football is just like such a common thread to help connect with so many people, and yet every time the conversation turns to football, I always think, oh crap, this is something where like the whole country understands football, and yet I sort of feel like I'm kind of left out of the conversation. So kind of chatting to you about this and makes me think that there are so many, like, if I just got into football, I'm sure there are so many things that I could kind of tie in with examples with, like all the stuff that I care about, that I read about, and things like that.
Yeah, maybe we could have a conversation separately about the cultural references of football, because I think it's, again, sport. Are you a fan of sport generally, Ali? Or
I enjoy playing some sports, but I don't really follow sport as an institution.
Okay, so I think with sport, it's often there's useful culture, okay, obviously cultural references, but also a lot about improvement and efficiency. For example, marginal gains, the 1% rule, the idea of improving a little bit on certain areas, that was popularized in the British cycling team. And they went from being like no hopers in cycling to dominating, like in fact Britain's Olympic successes in the 2008, 12, 16, the cycling team were right up there because they focused on small improvements, like small improvement in the bike, small improvement in nutrition. And again, that 1% rule is something that a lot of people that read about psychology and mindset know about, but in the sports field they use it. So I think sports can be a useful way of, almost like a magnifying glass on what is the best way of improving and being most efficient, because you can, I think, transplant some of those ideas into academic studies, professions and jobs.
Yeah, and there's so much kind of research on things like peak performance, and sports is one of the arenas that's so sort of comparatively easier to research than a lot of other fields. So you end up with loads and loads and loads of examples from like studies of psychology that use sportsmen as examples, and the cycling team is like a perfect analogy for the 1% rule. Just getting back to the book thing. So sort of in those few months where you were filming the TV show, you were writing each night. To what extent did you have an outline of the book in mind already, versus like sort of, or did that sort of kind of develop over time? Because one thing that's sort of holding me back at the moment from writing this book that I want to write is thinking, oh well, I should probably outline it first, and then sort of, it feels like such a mountain to be like, okay, well, I need to now suddenly figure out exactly what my book's going to be about, which is the hard work anyway, and then I just end up putting it off and procrastinating. So how do you kind of get over that?
Thing is, okay, in an ideal world, you would have an outline, because it's almost like if you're going on a journey, if you don't know where you're heading, it's going to be difficult to navigate. So again, blue sky scenario, you should have an outline. But again, the reality is, unless your book is if it's a work of fiction, you definitely need an outline. So I'm currently now trying to write a kids book.
Oh, really? Nice.
So that's my next venture, is kids book. I'd love to, at some stage, one of my separate ambitions is to have something that's made into a TV series, like a kids story. So that's in the pipeline. But if it's a non-fiction book, generally you have again, my book is about how numbers changed my life, and I knew there are various bits about how my interest in cooking or sports, or my interest in astronomy, and they're separate. While there's obviously a thread linking them, they are discrete parts of my life or discrete bits of my story. So I just wrote different things. I actually didn't write the book in the order it came out, apart from the last chapter. The last one I did leave it. In fact, the first and last chapter I did in the order. The first chapter was number 1, and the last chapter I wrote, because then you get the sense of the narrative in your own mind. But other chapters, I did chapter 3, then chapter 8, then chapter 2. So I think in an ideal world, a writer would write in order from chapter 1 to whatever 17 in my book, because then as you write the book, your mind refers back to previous things. But the reality is, writing is a messy process. The FBR, fast, bad, wrong. It's better to write chapter 5 than to spend ages thinking, I haven't got my content, I haven't got my structure, unless it's fiction. Fiction is the only thing where if you're writing chapter 3 before chapter 1, you're going to be in difficulty. But non-fiction, you can have the luxury of writing things and editing it, adding references to chapter 7 in chapter 9 later on. So I think be prepared to write in an unusual order.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that. I will definitely send you some more WhatsApps as I kind of go along this process, and you can feed me some more tips. One thing I wanted to ask you about. So you're obviously a very good communicator. You're famous on TV for being a communicator and stuff. And I noticed that almost every question I ask you, instead of answering the question, you tell a story, and that's really cool. Apparently, this is how a lot of people in sort of Southern America, the like Texas and stuff. Apparently this is how they communicate. Like where you would ask a question and they would answer with a story, and it's a very effective and engaging form of communication. To what extent was this sort of a natural thing versus to what extent did you sort of actively work on the sort of public communication-y side of stuff?
I would say with like many things in my life, it's a combination of the two. There's an element of a natural part of me that likes telling stories, but it's something that I've developed through support from parents, family and friends. And I know my dad, he's got, in fact, 2 or 3 books in the house that says, tell a story. And my dad always says, if you want to tell facts to people, you want to teach them about, let's say, the Vikings, you could just say, here's 10 facts about Vikings. Fact number 1, they never had horned helmets. Do you know that? Do you realize? Vikings, it's a myth.
Oh,
they never wore horns.
Okay, cool.
Never. Yeah, so I could tell you 10 facts, and you may remember it. But if I tell you a story about the horns, and I tell you that the Vikings always had flat helmet, or a circular helmet, but in the 1880s, Wagner, do you remember his what's it, the one in Apocalypse Now? Right, the Valkyries. And when they were performing that in New York, I think, or in America, in Germany for the world premiere, the set designer wanted a way to make the sort of actors look really accomplished and extravagant. So he put horns on just for effect. So again, if I give you 10 facts that are isolated, you may remember it, you may not. But if you put a story around it, people remember the story. And I always find when I do public events about maths education or anything, people often sort of forget the key, like they might forget the key messages that I was saying, but they'll remember the stories. Because I think humans as a species, that, when we, again, this maybe it's a bit primitive an explanation, but we'd sit around the fire, we'd tell stories of our day, the woolly mammoth we hunted, and, a near miss with a saber-toothed tiger. Stories are the way that we communicate. As much as I think that numbers are the key thread in society, it's stories. That's what makes us human. There's no other species that does. And I was reading the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari, and no other species, whether it's the tiger or the moth or the lizard or monkeys, they don't tell stories. That's the one thing that makes us distinct. We have stories, we pass them on. So I think we're not naturally inclined to tell stories, but we've been programmed as a species to tell stories. And in that way, again, as a child, my dad used to read lots of storybooks to us. So obviously there's an element of being given that skill set. But again, I realized the more I do public communication, especially with maths, because maths is a subject where people often, then so many times I get invited to events or talks where someone has been said, book Bobby in, it's a maths event. The person that's the presenter knows nothing about me. And they're like, oh God, we've got a maths person. But then when I talk, they're like, oh, we'll give them a chance, because I don't just say, oh, let's learn about trigonometry, height, ratio, opposite. I mean, obviously there's an element of that, but I bring in a story about when trigonometry was used, or the Greeks. And when you bring in stories, people listen to you. And then you can deliver the hard messages that need to be delivered. But stories are much more memorable. So again, for me, there's an element of my life story that's meant that I've learned to tell stories, but it's a skill. If you compare me now to 3 years ago, I would say I've got better at telling stories. And you come back to me in 3 years' time, I'm sure it'll develop. So everything in life, you've got elements of natural talent, but it's a skill. You can really develop storytelling. Absolutely, every single one of your viewers, they can develop their storytelling skills. It's not an inborn thing. We can develop it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think like one of the main kind of impressions I get from talking to you is that I feel that you're a kindred spirit in that we both very much believe that everything is a skill and everything can be learned. Like there's just absolutely no two ways about it. So like I've been thinking a lot about storytelling in the context of making better YouTube videos, because I think to date most of my YouTube videos have been a sort of here is the facts and this is them in the order that I would write them in an essay, point 1, 2, and 3, which kind of works. But sort of I feel like the next step, at least for me, is to figure out how I can deliver this stuff in a more story-like way. And so I've been reading kind of loads of books about this. There's one by a guy called Matthew Dix called Storyworthy, which I'm going through at the moment, and he's got a fantastic podcast as well. Or apparently, have you come across this thing called The Moth?
The Moth is like a butterfly.
Yeah, but it's like this organization where they run competitions in storytelling. And they have like events all around the world apparently where sort of people go and you put your name in a hat and your 10 people's names get picked out and they tell a story without any notes for like 10 minutes. And apparently this is a thing. And this guy, Matthew Dix, kind of won lots of these Moth competitions, and then he wrote a book called Storyworthy, which is about how we can find stories from our day-to-day life and how we can all become better storytellers. And there's a thing that he talks about early on in the book called homework for life. which I've been doing since I discovered it like a month ago. And the homework for life is that every single evening you keep a spreadsheet or a database or whatever, and you write down and you answer the question, what is the most story-worthy moment of my day? And some days, maybe you haven't got any story-worthy moments, but you force yourself to find something that you can either turn into a story or turn into an anecdote or something. Mm-hmm. And so I've been doing this for the last month or so, and it's helped me be like, oh, actually, that was kind of cool. I would have forgotten about it had I not kind of written it down in Notion, which is where I write all my story stuff. But also, it sort of forces me to kind of reflect on each day. In that, like yesterday I was like, story. I mean, it was a Saturday. I was just kind of sitting at home doing nothing. But okay, let me run through my day and think about all the things I did. Oh, okay, I suppose that was kind of interesting. And in a way, he sort of says in the book that the more you do this, the more life kind of slows down for you, because now you've got this sort of thing, this thing that's easy enough to do each night, where you're actively reflecting on your day. And my housemate Molly writes a daily diary, which is a habit I've often been jealous of. Like, oh, I wish I could do that, because in a way you are sort of shortening shortening the as in the point I'm trying to make is that like time is short, and we're sort of experiencing it twice rather than just the once. Yeah, homework.
I love the idea of experiencing life twice. Again, I do something similar. Not the story part, but I have the concept in my family. We love the idea of a gratitude journal, where at the end of every day, you think of ideally 3 things. Maybe the first thing you wake up, you think of 3 things that you're grateful for. So it could be, I'm grateful that I'm waking up. I'm grateful that the sun is shining. I'm grateful that I've got a few interesting activities planned today. At the end of the day, you might do the same thing. Like, I was grateful that I had a great dinner. I was grateful that my mum said my hair looked really good today. I was grateful that I watched a fabulous, watched this Ali and Bobby YouTube chat. So I think having that process of being grateful, like the similar way in which you think about looking for a story, I think makes you more appreciative of life. And I think the people that are grateful are the ones that feel happy. And again, happiness is not a destination. You're like Miley Cyrus. You're not trying to get to that, but it's a process. And if you're consistently thinking of being grateful about things in your life, it makes you a more reflective person. And then you have, again, that phrase that you said, I love that, about you living it twice. Because if you're grateful, you've had that first experience. Again, the first time my mum said my hair looked nice today, I get a little glow. And at the end of the night, if I reflect on it, I'm really thankful that my mum said my hair was nice, because my mums can often be critical. Asian mothers are like that. But that's good. I never conceptualized it in the way of we're living that memory twice, because we've had the first experience and the reflection of it. So it makes it more powerful.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think this gratitude journal thing is really cool as well. There's some study I came across where they found that just the act of keeping a gratitude journal is equivalent for your personal happiness levels as having a doubling of your salary. And if you imagine how much happier you think you'd be if your salary was doubled, and then you just sort of writing down 3 things you're grateful for has the same effect on people's self-reported levels of happiness. And I think that's just absolutely mind-blowing.
Oh, that's outrageous. So that's what I'm gonna do. So maybe if I become a boss at some stage and they're looking for a pay rise,
exactly.
I'd say, why don't you just get a gratitude journal instead? Here you go.
Here's my gift to you. Here's a journal. Okay, cool. So just a final couple of things I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned when we were talking about your success in sort of post-university challenge that you became a yes man. You were sort of saying yes to everything. I imagine now you're a bit more discerning about the things that you say yes to. There's a guy called Derek Sivers, who's one of my favorite thinkers on the internet. He says that at the start of your career, say yes to everything. But then when you start getting any levels of success, you should change your bar to be, it's either a hell yeah or it's a no. And I wonder how do you think about kind of saying yes to opportunities and stuff these days relative to when you were kind of just getting started out?
It's been a challenge, because I think throughout my life, I've generally been someone that likes saying yes. And then obviously post-university challenge, I had lots of opportunities. I was excited, grabbing everything, come on the show here, write this blog here, give us some comments here. And I would say yes to everything. And I obviously had a virtual cycle where I got offered more opportunities. But now that was 3 years ago now. So I've been sort of a public figure in education in the UK for 3 years. And now I've got to the point where it's difficult because I have to be more nuanced about this. I can't accept everything. I still get people every day 3-4 requests saying, "Can you go on my podcast? Can you write an article for us?" But the one thing is, I always try and, if I can, I still remember what it was like when I started my journey. So I will try, if I can, to support people if I possibly can. Again, if there's someone new setting up a podcast about, let's say, someone approached me last week saying, "I've got a new podcast in West Ham. I'd love for you to come and talk about your experience of being a follower." And I said to him, "I'd love to. I'm really busy the next few weeks, but give me a nudge in a few weeks." So what I'll often try and do is I'll tell people, I've got a full plate on. Let me try and take it on. And again, that's not really, I know, the hell yes or what's those? Hell yes or
hell yeah or no.
Yeah, I'm not good at the no yet. It's not been part of my character. I do need to develop that, because I think sometimes I've inadvertently let people down recently because I've said I'll try and do it, and then I get busy and I'm not able to. And they sort of built up the expectation that Bobby will come on my podcast or Bobby will write me a blog, and I kept on delaying it. So actually, I'm actually probably doing more harm to them and to myself by saying, "Oh, I'll try and do it." And maybe people prefer a clearer no. So actually, in terms of my self-development, I need to perhaps become someone better at saying no, because I'll be honest, that's one of my failings. I am pretty terrible at saying no. My response now is, let me try, come back to me in a few weeks and give me a nudge, and let's see if we can make something happen. That's generally my response. I almost never say no. The only things I say no to are when there's an ethical fit that's not correct. For example, I got approached by a gambling company saying, "We'd love to work with you on some sort of resources about how gambling and maths work," and I'm like, "No, I can't." They're offering a lot of money for it. So if there's an ethical or a complete like dissonance with my character, the proposition, I will say no. But for things which are like, that it would be nice if I had time, I'm not very good at saying no. So, but I do need to, because I think I'm adding extra pressure on myself, because it goes to my wall planner, it goes to my diary, and then also the person expects you. They're like, "Oh, Bobby Seagull's agreed to come on my podcast," and 6 months later they're still, and then they'll be like, and then if they have a conversation, they'll be like, "Oh, Bobby Seagull's unreliable. He said he would do a podcast." 6 months later, I ask him every month, he's saying no. So actually, I'm doing a disservice to them and to myself. So actually, I need to actually develop that. Who's it? Derek Simmons, he said.
Sivers, Sivers. Yeah, he's very good. His blog is amazing. Sivers.org. He's also got a book. He's got a book that you would really like. Do I have it in arm's reach? I don't. It's like this small. It's called Anything You Want, 40 Lessons for a New Kind of Entrepreneur. And it's one of the 3 books that's most changed my life. It takes literally 20 minutes to read. Would recommend.
What's it called?
It's called Anything You Want, 40 Lessons for a New Type of Entrepreneur.
Okay, Sivers.
Yeah. He was actually the previous guest on the deep dive last week, so you're in good company.
Well, okay, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. No, I also need to get better at saying no to things. I found that actually. So this is gonna sound weird, but like a few weeks ago, I got a personal assistant, and now she helps me say no to a lot of the things that I would feel bad saying no to otherwise. Like she would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Thanks for your email. Ali's plate is full right now, and sorry."
Yes.
And it's so much easier saying that through a third party than through kind of me being like, "Sorry, I get that you're doing this thing, but I just don't want to." And it's just so hard to say no to that kind of stuff. But you kind of have to once you start getting a sort of critical mass of opportunities and things, because there just physically isn't enough time to be doing all the stuff. And sometimes people, occasionally I'll get like an angry Instagram DM from someone who's been trying to message me 3 times and it's just got lost amongst the Instagram DM requests, being like, "Hey, back in the day you were replying to all your fans. It seems like you've forgotten that we're the ones that made you." And all this stuff. I'm like, look, I get some of those as well. I'm so sorry, but like, I would love to be able to reply to everyone, but like, the reason I have any level of success on the internet is because I create content in my spare time, and if I spent 8 hours a day replying to Instagram DMs, it's just it's not a sustainable thing. So I need to get better at saying no in those contexts.
Yeah, actually, when you mentioned about the DMs, for my TV show, I actually got told off in the nicest possible way by the publicist managing the TV show, because I spent the hundreds of tweets about our show 2 weeks ago. I responded to each and every single person on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
So, and I thought, I'm doing a good thing. Everyone feels great that they'll have a tweet from Bobby Seagull. And then the publicist for the show said, "I'm really great. I'm really glad that you responded to everyone. But can I tell you one thing? Because you responded to everyone, you clogged up everyone's Twitter feeds who follows you with like literally about 1,000 tweets about you responding to them. So A, you lost a lot of followers, and then B, you're devaluing your response, because if you're responding to every single person about every single, some people just said, I enjoyed your show. Okay, it's nice, but I don't need to spend writing a 280 character message saying, I really appreciate it, thank you, what did you enjoy? They're not asking, they're just putting out a message. So I need to also learn to be better at managing my times. Otherwise, then again, people often ask me, how do I manage to accomplish so much? I'm reasonably productive, but also I put in lots of hours. I put in the graft. Like in the last week, it's got better in the last week, but about 2 weeks ago, I was having 3 hours sleep a night, 2.5 hours, because I was working both, early morning, late night. And then that makes you unproductive. And it means when you're doing videos, content, you don't look great, you haven't got the energy. So actually at some stage, to protect yourself and the content and what you give to people, you do need to learn to say no. And I'm slowly learning that actually saying no actually is probably better for what I produce, rather than doing everything and then having 3 hours sleep and producing content that's not great. So
yeah, it's actually on that note. So you're quite a sort of prolific content creator in sort of all these different domains.
Yeah.
How do you balance kind of putting in the graft versus taking a break? How do you think about that?
But to be honest, the answer is, and it's not the answer that people want to hear, quite badly, to be honest, because I'm single. I don't have a person. My mother's Asian. She's upset. She's like, Bobby. She always says to me, Bobby, you're clever, but you're stupid. You do all these things, and I don't take advantage of going to like community events and meet people. I work hard, and I almost have this weird sort of, I get a sense of satisfaction when I'm not punishing myself, but I'm like working really hard. I'm like, yes, I had 3 hours sleep only. And I get this like weird kick of like, I've worked really hard. I worked 18 hours today, but actually, it's not healthy in the long run. Because again, short term, everyone has times in their life where you put in hours, you put in graft. But to create like a rounded persona, and also to be happy generally, you need rest, you need break. And only when you take that break, you can take a step back. Almost like, I gave you the example of my PowerPoint had lots of mistakes. The PowerPoint of your life, to look at the mistakes, you need to take a break and have a look at it from a fresh set of eyes. If I'm constantly working on my PowerPoint, working 18, 20 hours a day, I can never take a step back and realize, oh, these are things that are going well. These are not the things going well. But if I can take a step away, like I've not even actually taken off, apart from watching Michael Jordan, that I saw as part of my learning. I've not taken off half a day in 72 days.
Oh wow! Okay.
That's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And again, now I'm telling my brother, can I make it to 100 days? I'm not taking half a day, but it's not. That's unhealthy. So I need to learn to have a healthier approach, and it means that longer term, the quality of stuff I produce will be better because I'll be refreshed and I'll have a fresh perspective. So I am reasonably productive in the time that I use, but at the moment I'm prolific because I'm putting in the hours. But I need to learn to curtail that, because otherwise, longer term, I'm asking for a breakdown or something untoward. So don't follow my example of working all the hours that God gives us.
Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. Like I feel like I need a sort of system to allow myself to relax, because, for example, it's the weekend, and I've got tomorrow off work as well, and so my plan for tomorrow was like, oh great, I can do a day in the life vlog day, and I can be super productive because I'm filming myself doing stuff, and therefore that encourages me to be more productive, and all these bits. And like, there was I think on Friday night, I got home from work around 6 p.m. and I did my workout, I filmed a video, and it was like 9:30. I was like, oh, I mean, this is kind of weird. I've got 2 hours before bed and I don't really know what to do, because next week's sponsored video is sorted. We've just released a Skillshare class. Don't need to think about the next one for a couple of weeks. I guess I just read a book, and I kind of lay in bed reading a book, but it's just like something felt very weird about it. So I'm thinking that for me, I need to maybe make some sort of rule that, okay, no more hustle after 10 p.m. And then that becomes like a firm thing, because I feel like for me, like I'm quite I like having rules and systems for myself. Like I've got this rule that I'm not allowed to watch TV if I'm on my own, and that sort of is in one fell swoop that eliminates so much time wasting from my life. Because brilliant. If I watch it with other people, it's a social activity, so it has dual benefit. And if I watch it on my own, I mean, I'm not really getting anything from that. So yeah, I feel like I need some kind of rule for this. So yeah, I feel where you're coming from, and I think it's all too easy to make this busyness a badge of honor. I think especially because like I don't get the impression that you're the sort of person who would kind of brag about being busy, and like I certainly wouldn't brag about being busy, but like internally I would get a bit of a kick. I'd be like, yeah, I'm sitting here putting in the graft, making another video while literally everyone else I know is playing Call of Duty, on iGrade. And I would think that internally, and that's probably quite bad.
Yeah. I think I tell this to some of my friends. It's okay to be it's okay to be good enough, because again, sometimes after 10 o'clock I'll be like, oh, now it's time to plan, strategize, and work out my aims for the next few days. But and then it never ends, because all of us, whatever your circumstances, there's always work to be done. Yeah. We could all work 24/7 if we wanted to, but the reality is you do need to occasionally say, okay, no more hustle after 10 p.m. or I'm going to give myself this afternoon off, because in the long term we are more productive if we give ourselves a break and the time to reflect. To be honest, I'm saying this now, and I'm probably going to now do some work after this. So I need to take my own medicine, Bobby Seagull.
Yeah, I find that it's often that this is another thing that Derek Sivers talked about in our interview last week. He said that when we're giving advice, we are our highest selves, and so it's so much easier to sort of dish out advice than it is to take it ourselves when it comes to anything in life.
Yeah.
There was another thing I want to talk about. So one thing that I've for me, one kind of North Star that I've had in terms of how I guide my decision making for the last sort of 8+ years has been this idea of I want to achieve financial independence, in that I want to not have to rely on my day job to survive, and I want work to be optional rather than a requirement. And now kind of with like the YouTube and the side businesses and online courses and stuff, by the grace of God, I've definitely gotten to this point where I don't need my day job to survive anymore. And yet I still find myself, like we put out a Skillshare class yesterday that it's yet another stream of passive income, and I'm like, all right, cool, I guess we're moving on to the next one. But I guess there comes a point where like the whole point of working for this future is so that like the whole point of kind of working hard when you're young is so that you have a bit more freedom to enjoy yourself when you're a bit older. But I find that for me, I think I'm falling into that trap of like the goalpost keeps on moving. And like if anyone were to look, like I made a video a few weeks ago talking about sort of openly about how much money I make from YouTube, and all the comments were like, oh my god, bloody hell, this is amazing. And if I'd known that I'd be making like £5,000 a week of passive income of essentially for doing nothing, when I was a few years ago, I'd have had a stroke, because I've been like, what the hell. But now we all get so accustomed to the level of success or the level of whatever that we're currently in that we sort of shift the goalpost. And I guess what I wanted to ask you is that how much of that changing the goalpost / sort of the hedonic adaptation have you got through? You're a big famous celebrity, you've got this book. How do you think about sort of the goalpost shifting in terms of your own personal goals and stuff?
Yeah, I think the problem I think it's natural for us to shift our goalposts, because as humans we tend to normalize things very quickly, which is why often if you ask people that are earning millions, obviously I always think you need a certain amount of income so that you're comfortable, you can feed, clothe yourself, support your family, have a few nice things. Once you've got the basics though, and you're comfortable, actually an extra million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, does it necessarily change the quality of your life? I don't know how much. Because in the UK, there's often a stat that says in the UK, once you've got 50,000, 60,000 pounds income a year, about there, then anything else, you've got to obviously put an extra graft to get further income, but then you're compromising on the quality of your life. So there's always a trade-off. And with myself, I think initially I got a kick from doing live television, a kick from doing a live broadcast. Again, now I've become, I'm not appreciative, but I'm now like, oh, tomorrow morning I've got something on, I've got a live interview on Channel 5, and I'm like, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to prepare, I've got to think of my outfit. But I should be excited. I'm like, oh, I've got a live interview, maybe like, a million people might watch my interview, and that's a great chance for me to communicate. But I've become my goalposts have changed in terms of I now expect a couple of live things a week. So I think the problem with that is then you don't ever get the chance to enjoy your success. And if we talked about, if you're aiming for a destination, you're not going to enjoy the journeys that, with Miley Cyrus, the climb was the whole part of the thing. You should enjoy yourself along all the base camps. Otherwise, when you get there, you're like, is there all there is to it? So I think we are naturally as a species, we do adjust our goalposts. We do keep normalizing things. Again, footballers, who are earning millions of pounds, having adoration from lots of people across the world, they don't bat an eyelid now if they buy a Bentley or something. But when they first became a footballer and they got like a 20,000 bonus, they must have been incredibly excited. So I think it's human to normalize our new conditions, but we need to somehow take a step back and say, actually, 5 years ago, maybe this is why diaries or journals are brilliant, because you can look back at it and read and go, I actually found by chance a journal of mine yesterday from about 10, 12 years ago. And I looked at some of my goals and I'm like, and I said things about being financially independent and having a voice in the field that I do. And I look, I have a voice in education. So I should be proud that tomorrow morning I'm going on news for about 5-10 minutes talking about the importance of education and maths. And I've got that voice I wanted. So I should feel more grateful. But I think when we get trapped in the hustle and bustle, we forget. And then when we forget, then we get dissatisfied. Then we're like, I've got to do another YouTube video. I've got another interview. I'm going to write another blog post. And then we become a bit miserable and moody, and we feel like we're caught up. But we should actually embrace, you've got a lifestyle where you are doing YouTube, you want to do that. I am talking about maths and education. So we should feel more grateful, but it's difficult. It's very human to normalize our new state of affairs. Very human to do so.
Yeah. I think I think for all of us, it's a constant struggle to try and retain that perspective. And I think kind of keeping, for example, a gratitude journal is one sort of easy enough way of starting that process. There's a concept in the sort of financial independence community called lifestyle inflation, which is that your lifestyle sort of inflates to keep up with your level of income, so that you never truly feel as if you quote have enough money, because everyone has this chronic thing, I don't quite have enough money just yet, and sort of lifestyle creep, lifestyle inflation. And I think kind of gold creep, gold inflation, the new normal. This is all kind of the stuff that I'm thinking a lot about, just to try and get better at dealing with it. But it's a very first world problem. I'll be honest.
It is. I know. It's so when you talk about gold creep, gold inflation. So for normal economics in my banking days, obviously the central bank has monetary policy to they increase interest rates to control inflation. So we'd have our own version of increasing interest rates.
Yeah, you're right.
Our own
inflation.
Yeah, we control it. If we increase our interest rates, what would our interest rate be?
So my understanding is that the Bank of England interest rate, they try and keep inflation at around 2.5%. That is like an optimum. And if it's too high, that's bad. And if it's too low, that's bad. So maybe that's a good way for us to think about kind of goal settings. That I can inflate by 2.5%, but much more than that is I'm going Zimbabwe route. This is not good.
Yeah, hyperinflation. Anything too low, you're ending up in Japan from the 1980s.
Yeah.
Shrinking economies. You don't want to be Zimbabwe. You don't want to be Japan. You want to be in that Goldilocks zone of where the goal is you are being stretched and you are shifting your goalpost, but you're not too fast, or you're not just being static either. Again, that's the dream that all of us try and pursue.
Yes. Okay. This is some good stuff. That is all of the things on my sort of ever expanding list of things that I wanted to talk to you about. Thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
This has been a real pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. It's been 2 hours. Wow, it's a long time.
Yeah, no, I'm not
it felt like the time is absolutely flying. Yeah.
8:02. I'm like, wow.
Nice. Okay. It's good timing to end this. I'm gonna not do any work tonight. I'm gonna eat and then do a workout, and then while listening to my audiobook. I'm listening to this incredible fantasy series called The Wheel of Time, and I've just started listening to it at double speed, and now it's so fast paced, it's so good. I just I can't wait to leave work, so on the drive home I can listen to my audiobook. That is how sad I've become. But that'll be my evening. What's your plan for the evening?
So I have, in theory, I told you I'm part of this home festival of online activities. So they're doing like an evening online Jenga. So I'm meant to take part in that. But I also got an interview to prep for tomorrow morning, and I've got a maths class that I haven't got ready yet. And then I've got another interview with the BBC about my favourite character in history. So I'm going to do some reading about Stephen Hawking. So I will make some time for myself. I've actually started rewatching The Last Dance.
Oh, wow.
Honestly, I've never been as sold on something.
Yeah.
I've watched it, gripped, and I'm now on episode 1.
You are a true Michael Jordan zealot.
Honestly, I've actually ordered Michael Jordan Home and Away kit.
Oh, wow.
The next time you see me, I'll be wearing a vest with the Jordan Chicago Bulls.
So this is kind of how I felt about Phil Knight after reading Shoe Dog. Have you read Shoe Dog?
No, Phil Knight.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, he's
the Nike guy.
The Nike guy. Yeah.
But of
Yeah,
course I know,
and
yeah.
like after I read that book, I like it like made me cry. I was like full on Nike fanboy. I was like, oh my god, everything Nike doing is amazing. They're sort of really really hard done by. They're really misunderstood. It wasn't their fault about all the factory stuff. It's just like I became a true Nike fanatic to everyone that I met. Be like, oh my god, guys, Phil Knight is the most amazing guy ever. But yeah, anyway, I think that this is a good place to end this. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everyone
Thank you.
for tuning in on the chat, and we will see you later.